All right, why don't we get started? We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the South Burlington School Board meeting. And we will start with any comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to any amendments, David.
We need to find a place to just put in legislative update, so that would be the only amendment we should just make note of.
Towards the end, in case Martin comes.
Yep, that's probably a good bet.
Why don't we maybe do that before the consent agenda?
Yeah, just before. So we'll add legislative like 13A or.
Okay. All right, so we'll move on to agenda item 5. You want to start with those announcements?
Yes, ladies.
Student representative report.
So the Student Career Job Expo, as I said last time, is Tuesday, April 7th, from noon to 2 in the high school gym, as well as the elementary school parent conferences are April 2nd and 3rd. The early release is at 11:30 a.m. for all elementary school students.
Also, congrats to the FHTMS Mass Counts team of Kelly Yu, Kaylee Yang, Raghulan Shiva Kumar, and Sabrina Chang for winning the state championship, and for Kaylee and Raghulan for qualifying for the national championship. Also, the spring sports have started, and they started last week. Also, last Friday marks the end of the third quarter, so for the high school, we're officially in the fourth quarter. And the Vermont Science and Math Fair this past Saturday, 2 of the high school students qualified for a national competition, and 3 qualified for an international competition.
And previously, the student council has put on Spring Fling, so that went really well, and a lot of the students dressed up, and we had a lot of school spirit. And we had a pep rally at the end of the week, which a lot of students enjoyed. Also, our school is getting really big into March Madness. I know my peer leadership class has made brackets, and I just went to the middle school, and they have all their brackets up on the wall. So that's pretty fun to get the students involved.
And don't we have a leader, like a noted leader on the bracket?
right?
Yeah,
who's been- Spencer,
Yes.
like, got everything right so far? Or,
He was,
The
there were
first time.
11.7 million brackets entered in ESPN.
Wow.
And 14 were correct after,
Up to the Sweet
up to 16, and he was one of the 14.
Wow.
That's
Not that he learned any of those skills as part of our formal curriculum.
thank you.
And then lastly, just the big thing is college releases are coming up. So all the seniors are deciding where they're going and stuff. So that's exciting too.
Right.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Any other
No,
announcements on your side?
I guess the only other one I would say is important to know, and I'll be back out to the board around the principal search process at Rick Marcotte. I would ask that board members, I would like a board member to be part of that committee. And I'm just going to let you know that it's about 10 meetings or so from the start to finish. So that's kind of a little bit of the expectation that will bring us into May. And I'd love a board member. So I'll come out with a little bit more information to you, but you can begin thinking about that commitment. This is in part connected to our hiring guidelines, connected to kind of the type of involvement that we want on each of those respective committees. So not asking for an answer now, just again, updating you, and also important to the public that they're aware that we're in process. We have put out applicants. We're receiving applicants to date. We've got more than, I think, 25 currently. So that looks good.
Good. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 6, master planning, financial stewardship, and the city-school collaboration.
So master planning and visioning, again, thanks to the board members for making that, and Dan I will try to provide some synopsis for you. There wasn't a lot of handout information, but there was a lot of conversation and dialogue. But again, thanks for being there. We were, I think, pleasantly surprised by the turnout. You could see a little bit of some reactionary decision-making on adding chairs to some of our roundtables. Again, we feel that the process went really well. We have a lot of information that we're now kind of disaggregating and pulling together. We've gotten immense amount of positive feedback from the community that participated. We think we really had a good representation of folks that within our community, a fairly good representation that way, and we'll be continuing that work. Important to note, we need to talk a little bit more clearly with the board on kind of when that end time is. We initially had kind of the end of March, first part of April, and we kind of put to be determined. It feels like at this point we're going to need another community meeting in some fashion, probably not the same level, but to share information on the options and some of the cost modeling, and to be able to get some additional feedback before then you get a recommendation as well as the council. So we recognize that there's a few more steps that need to be articulated as we approach the end. Again, a lot of activity, a lot of information. We know that we've still not hit, again, we're going to say we were close to 200 people. Administrators were excellent, obviously participated in as facilitators along with the task force members. So again, I feel like we have a good process. We know that just because we had 200 or just under, we know that we have a lot more to do, and we're going to really work hard to get the information updated and get the community survey out, as well as the suggestion box publicized. So you'll see our websites, respond to that. So I don't know if there's, before we move off of that, I don't know, again, some general feedback and some recommendations to me on kind of some next steps or observations that you have in moving forward. Again, the objective here is that the board and the council get a couple suggestions and options that you then can consider, and that's really the impetus for this work.
Yeah, a couple things that came up from my perspective. First of all, I thought the meeting was extremely well attended, and I thought the facilitators and participants were really engaged in these discussions. So I was really impressed at the crowd and really the passion around this process. So it was a pretty impressive group. A couple things that came up maybe as a little bit of sidebars is it may make sense to invite Paul Connor to an upcoming board meeting. The couple things that have come up, which are really not the purview or within the scope of the committee that the City Council and School Board has engaged in managing this process, are some strong feelings about both the schools and what the configuration looks like, but also if the community were to take a vote based on the school board's recommendation to sell a property, there are strong opinions about what should go on that property. And the process of form-based codes is out in front of any decisions even coming from the task force around recommendations on school configuration. So Paul's feedback was the community really has two venues to provide feedback to the Planning Commission on kind of what goes in the city anywhere, regardless of where it is. And the first is right now, which is through the regulations with form-based codes. And the second is really after the fact through, I think, it may be design review, but I'm not sure if that's it or not. But I thought it might be good for our board to be informed as to what's going on concurrently with form-based codes, so we kind of know how to inform the community about any decision-making process that the task force makes in line with what may be happening in the regulatory environment through the Planning Commission. Because I think those two, I think the community will be better informed by understanding how those two interplay.
Yep. So we have the April 6th work session meeting.
Yes, yeah.
I don't know about his availability. and that it was not, that's not able to be a televised meeting, unfortunately, so I'm just trying to think about some timeliness issues. I could ask him to be part of that, but it doesn't get the exposure of community involvement, and we haven't been able to publicize it. But that might be a first good step if he could make that meeting, as well as maybe have him on a subsequent agenda. I just worry about the timing of it all.
Right. Julie?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we should, sorry. That, we have so much work to do with that work scheduled meeting that I think and I also think there'd be some benefit to having that publicized if he's gonna be there so that people that watch it can understand what the issues are.
Yeah, my worry, of course, is that
Timing.
if, I'm a little bit dismayed that we've been doing this together. If there are things that are going on that, again, we're sitting in the school committee task force, if there are issues that should be resolved, then I'd like to ensure that the city is collaboratively doing that. I'm happy that the conversation, and I had it with Paul too, and took it from our conversation last night, but I'm a little dismayed that, why is this
Yeah.
delayed right now?
Can he be in the next Kevin
We
and
can, I just think
Pat
there may be
meeting?
some actions that need to happen in between now and even that's our then second meeting in April,
No. What about the Kevin and Pat and you
Yeah,
guys?
we have a meeting on the
Yeah.
22nd, I think. No, 15th.
Yeah, I'm
the
not sure,
15th.
I know it is next week
It's
or the
coming up.
following, yeah.
And
I'm
don't
worried about timing.
misinterpret what first of all, processes run in parallel all the time. So it's not like this, there's nothing, in my opinion, that is contrary necessarily, but it's sort of knowing what's going on with form-based code so that could inform.
layers, yeah.
It's kind of a layering. And the city
Fine.
council, it'll be up to the council to kind of say, maybe we need to delay making decisions because they're a little more, related than we thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to say anything, it's been a great process. It is about understanding all the layers, and perhaps we haven't talked about all the layers, or I haven't been privy to the conversations in the layers that have emerged from the city either. So I get you. Let me work to get him into play. We won't worry about pushing into the 6th, and we'll see when his availability so that we can publicize that and have him come to us and help us with the planning. It's fine. It's good. So I don't know if any other questions?
Other feedback on the,
The only other
Session.
comment I would make, I think the meeting went very, very well in addition, and the only thing that in hindsight, looking at kind of my mind's eye of that meeting is I mentioned to one person walking out, I didn't see a lot of young people, high schoolers in that meeting, and I'm not sure if we hit all of the kind of economic and social or socioeconomic groups that we want to make sure we engage with. So I'm not sure if there's a way to solve that problem particularly, but I want us to, continue to think that through and see if there's a way that we can make sure we're touching all parts of our community.
So that's a good one. I'm glad that Patrick's here, because part of Patrick also, again, one of the folks that have given those 600 hours on the task force, beyond what he does within the building. That conversation has happened, and Patrick is going to engage, I believe, with some a similar exercise with the students. I don't know.
Either next week or the week after, we're going to do the exact big deal activity as part of public issues and world affairs.
Great.
We'll just I got to get the decks.
Yeah. So that's one. The other part is you're absolutely right. We're observant of the participation, and that we know, kind of as we have done with voting, is that we recognize, a couple of our area schools were not that well represented. So it's up to us around our due diligence around trying to get out there and how we can, either through the community survey process, may not just be electronic, but how we can make sure everyone has a chance to weigh in on that. And so we're going to talk more about how to do that.
Good.
So by no means are we done. And again, we say we had a good turnout, and I said this back in 2008 when we had 150, but we're nowhere near our, a representative, a high enough population to help us with that. So we want to make sure that we're doing more than that, and that's all part of the work we've been doing.
Great.
Yeah, the other thought I had too on that, and are you thinking the second community meeting could be as early as the end of this month?
I really need to look at that. That would be That would be probably the objective.
Yeah.
If we could, I'd like to try to keep it within. I think once we start getting into May, we have a lot of distractions that start happening for families. So that would be the objective. We have a date yet. We have a date set for our next master planning vision, which I think is a Thursday, right, Patrick, next week? I'm putting you on the spot, sorry. April 9th. So we'll talk and firm up that calendar. But I'd like to see that we come out pretty quickly with that response. So.
Well, and the other thought that I think may represent a little confusion with the community is that that it might be worth something in the other paper that just kind of bullet points next steps of the process. But I think there's a little confusion around, does the task force make the recommendation to sell a school property?
Yeah.
And does the school board make the decision to sell the school property? And I think what really needs to be communicated is that there's still several parts of the process.
Right.
There are recommendations, but ultimately the community would vote on a recommendation. But that also does bring up the issue of, I think we discussed this really early on in the process, that schools are assets of the community, and if there were any recommendations that ultimately the school board would take on to reconfigure a school and consolidate, I think we have an obligation to go out for an RFP.
I think
That's a
because the sale,
question.
yes, I believe that's the case, absolutely. I don't see how you can get around that. I mean, it's significant. You'd have to solicit requests, I believe.
So
for
the
that.
question I would have, and this might require some investigation, is do we have to sequentially wait for an RFP process, or are there times in the more immediate future that we could actually inform ourselves and potentially the task force by going out with an RFP that was non-committal but that represented some kind of either valuation or something that would inform the process?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to tell you that.
Yeah.
Certainly, as we look to those next steps, I need to provide you with kind of the possible options.
Okay.
You may choose to, not do that necessarily, but you have the options to do, as you said, what are they? So I'll need to make sure that.
It might be helpful to
consult legal.
understand if that is even feasible and
Yep.
where it might add value to the process.
Yeah, so I'll work on getting that cleared up as we roll out again next steps with the task force and how we're going to move forward and what that timeline will look like for you. So again, I don't know if there's any other questions before I move on. Again, it's hard to quickly move on to from that work. There was a lot of work, a lot of time, and again, I think what we presented was, which has already been said, there was a real sense of wanting input and valuing input and really allowing that to happen in a fairly succinct period of time.
Okay.
So, anyway, the other thing I want to say is in regard to kind of the city-school collaboration, we also have the airport process, and I'm not going to go over this at length. At your place is a version of the housing removal project, and actually Bart is here. Bart and I did meet with Justin Rabideau last week, and went over the city's plan in working with a consultant around the home removal process. And so you'll see it in here in stages. This was what was presented at the meeting that the city held. But you see the effect of some of the homes that are going to happen. And we are working collaboratively with the city around what the disruption will likely be to ensure that it's, the traffic pattern, the walking pattern, the noise levels, and all of those things, as well as the impact in communication to our parents. And so it's really important. Karsten was at this meeting for me, and Bart and I have had subsequent meeting with Justin. They're very cooperative, and we're going to participate in a weekly meeting with them around with their hired contracting firm that's going to be removing them. So again, I give this to you just to let you know that it's happening. This is going to begin this month, and it's going to go on through September. And there's almost, close to 100 homes that are going to be demolished. Again, I don't know if you have any questions specific to that.
No?
Okay.
We're glad,
Enough.
we're glad we're involved in it.
Yeah.
We know what's going on.
Great.
All right, anything else on agenda item 6? All right, we'll move on to agenda item 7, the elevator and ADA project presentation.
So this is, I'm going to turn this over to John. We also have Rob Fitzgerald from Doran Whittier, who's also going to talk, is that right? Last night I say it right? Yeah. Talk a little bit about the process related to this school's elevator project. So, John, Rob?
2 weeks ago, we had the long session with Patrick Leduc and Julie Beatty, board members, and Rob and Tanya Forcier worked with him, went through the slideshow and then answered questions, and you got those earlier this week. Rob's gonna go through the slideshow. It's gonna be about 10 minutes, and then we'll have questions, and Bart's here. Bart's here is the director of facilities, and we're proposing he also be clerk of the works. And
Everybody know Bart?
One reason,
Yes,
I think everybody knows Bart, but Bart Vaselli is our director of facilities. So. And I just need to, we'll turn this on. Paper.
I'm always displacing.
You want to sit at my place there, or would you want to stand?
You can sit right here, Rob, in the back, and we'll your mic up.
Hi, my name is Rob Fitzgerald. I'm with Doran Whittier. Thanks for having me here tonight. Tonight we're just going to kind of give you a little bit of an overview of what we've done to date, where the elevator project stands, and some cost estimates, and kind of give you a little bit of a schedule moving forward.
Hold on a second, Rob. Allow me to quickly come. How am I doing so far, everybody? Good?
David, you're doing great.
Yeah, thank you, John.
You're AV certified.
Yeah.
If you want, I can.
Yeah, go ahead. You can stand where you're more comfortable.
Okay. So you'll flip the slides for me?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay.
So before we get started here, you'll also have to forgive me. I lost my glasses this weekend, so it's a little bit fuzzy. I may have to refer to the paper that I have in front of me here. So just or by memory. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide to kind of go over the agenda today. We'll just give you a little bit of the project history. We'll talk about each phase of the project. We divided it into 2 phases. There's a construction management process we'll briefly review, project cost estimate, and a rough schedule. So just to kind of bring everybody up to speed on where we started, this is the main entrance coming into the school, the main lobby here. This is the elevator that we're referring to. This is the hallway you go down. We're right here in the cafeteria, which is cut off. You can't see the whole room, but this is the cafeteria space, and this is the big picture space just beyond. So when we first looked at this problem we were given, we first tried to do an evaluation of, does it make sense to put the elevator anywhere else? We looked at a variety of options and just could not locate anywhere else in the building where it made sense, and we were able to hit all 5 levels. There are 5 levels, even though there's only 3 floors. This level that we're on right now, we're calling level 1. The level where the big picture space is 1.5, and this level where the main entrance is we're calling level 2. So you'll see that referred to throughout this presentation. And then the other floors are 3 and 4, are the other levels. So when we looked at this, we really couldn't find any other location other than putting it exactly in the same spot.
I want to add that we had the ADA audit done in December of 2013. We had Lehman Lanphier, another architectural firm, look at it, and they came up with the same conclusion, that this was the only place that would service all levels of the school.
So obviously, in order to comply with current code and ADA regulations, the elevator needed to be much bigger. But we found that we were able to fit it into the existing area, but we would have to demolish the existing shaft entirely, as well as the stairs here, which are currently problematic anyway with the height. As you go down those stairs, tall people have trouble potentially hitting their heads. So then what we did is, go to the next slide there.
Rob, can I just move you up here? I want to make sure the board can hear. You sit right beside that one. Sorry.
So what we did is we took a look at, well, this is the extent of the proposed project. Is putting in a new elevator. This is the larger elevator in this area here. This area in blue is really the extent of potential demolition that we would need to do. So in order to put in new foundations to support a new shaft, we have to remove more of the concrete floor around it in order to construct the foundation walls and have the guys get in there. So really the extent of the work is covering this area. And when we looked at that, we also looked at the timeline needed for purchasing the elevator and ordering the elevator, which has a 16-week lead time. What that told us is that we're just not able to get that done all in the summer. That we needed to phase the work because if we were blocking this off during school, or when it was going to get close to being done, being completed by the end of August, we would run the risk of potentially, being problematic for school functioning. So then we started looking at, let's look at alternative. What else can we do about this? And so we said, well, what if we put in some sort of either a temporary or a permanent corridor through this area here, which is back in by the picture space. It's currently used almost like a corridor right now anyway. So we went to look there and we found that, hey, there's a couple steps here and there's a ramp that's not in compliance over here. But we think that we can put in a corridor here, and that way we can divide the project into two phases and do this ramp and the new corridor first and the elevator second.
And I want to add that Patrick was involved almost from the start. And we had Joanne Godek and some of her people, occupational therapists look at, and physical therapists look at what we needed to do to comply with ADA. So that's where this idea came from, actually.
So, so this resolves our potential issue of running into time constraints over the summer, putting in an elevator. We can come in, do this this new corridor that's accessible, provides an accessible route now between level 1, level 1.5, and level 2 without the use of the elevator. So that if this work did extend into potentially close to the beginning of school, we're already set. So the plan is this work here would be done this summer, and this elevator work would be done the following summer. So digging down deeper into the scope of the work, you can see it by the red dashes. These are some of the walls that are being removed. We found through testing that the ceiling in the big picture space here has some hazardous materials that will need to get removed, and so that's happening as soon as school gets out. The first 3 weeks, all of that work is happening, and then the contractor will come in and continue with the additional demolition work. And then, like I said, this here is phase 2. And then, this just shows you that the previous phase was, or the previous slide was really talking about the hazardous materials, and this kind of a little bit more clearly shows phase 1 versus phase 2. And then new construction, as I mentioned, this will be much wider than it is today. You can see a much wider opening here. There's a ramp that comes down here. We've divided the big picture space into 2 spaces. So this is the size of about 850 square feet, which is a standard size classroom. And this is, I believe, like around 650. Still can accommodate 12 to 18 students. And so that leaves, you know, these spaces very flexible. We've removed that door and those set of stairs right over there, which on here are approximately right in this area. So just to this side of the railing is where the new doors for the cafeteria will be. So those doors right there will be removed, and they'll come back and be right on this side of the excuse me, of the railing. And the corridor coming through from the big picture space will come right through that wall and then out. So that's what you're seeing here is we're cutting through this this wall here where the stairs and door currently are, coming in here, we moved the cafeteria door back here and creating this hallway extension. So they'll be able to come in and out that way. There was also a door that's across here. We're removing that and relocating that over here. It makes much easier flow through the spaces.
Off to the left where the bigger opening is, where the hallway will start, just across the hall from that is an exit from the auditorium. So if an event happens and then kids are going right to the cafeteria or big picture, it adds more, it'll flow better.
And then the following summer, we would be removing the elevator and replacing the elevator machine in the machine room, and upgrading a few of the electrical panels that are associated with the work, and we'll be demolishing the stairs. And then going up a level, again, continued demolition of the chase, of the shaft for the elevator on the 3rd and 4th levels. This is at the roof level here with where it opens up onto the mezzanine that overlooks the gym. And then under the proposed work, we've shifted the stairs back a few feet to allow for easier transition, so we don't have that head bumping issue. Can't do anything about the actual underside of the stairs, but we've been able to move the stairs back, and then again enlarge the shaft, build a new shaft. And then again, this continues all the way up through the building, and we'll have to create a larger opening through the roof and build the new walls surrounding on the exterior with a new opening onto the mezzanine level. And then this kind of gives you a rough idea of what's there today. So if you look down this hallway here, this is the opening here that we're talking about. This is our sketch showing, you know, how wide that opening is. Basically comes out to here. So it's much wider and feels more like a real corridor, or part of the corridor. And then in this photo, you know, the elevator won't look really all that much different in terms of the location. The shaft will be right here where it's at, and really what we're doing is expanding this way. There's a big recess. If you look over there, there's a big recess in front of that, of the elevator doors, where we're expanding out, and so we're just replacing the ceiling in and around the work area. And then a view looking up through the big picture space. As you can see, it's sort of like a corridor today, and we'll just be formalizing it into a bona fide corridor that's accessible.
So Rob, that has some elevation change, right, or ramp?
Yes, there's a ramp here to a level area and then another ramp up.
That meets the ADA slope requirement?
Yes, yep. So the process that we're at with the construction management as constructor, we've pre-qualified contractors for the construction management end of things. We are expecting their bids for their general conditions and their fee on the 6th of April.
Yeah, they'll come to our office at noon, and those are what we'll witness at the board meeting on that night.
And right now, we've got in here April 15th as a selection date for the construction management, because that falls on a school board meeting. Wanted to kind of throw out an idea at you that we would recommend, if possible, which is to allow the superintendent to accept once we receive the bids, basically what happens is we and the school district will review the bids, and what we're going to be doing is evaluating them. We've pre-qualified 2 construction managers for this project, and we're going to evaluate. We had them fill out, a spreadsheet of their fees and the general conditions, and so we're going to be looking at those and comparing them. And once we complete our evaluation, we would recommend to the school board or to someone that you authorize to accept the low bid construction manager. So it should be the low bid construction manager, whoever it is, because we've already pre-qualified them. We already know that they're competent to complete the work. So it should be the low bid contractor. It's just a matter of verifying, are they showing us an apples to apples comparison of their fees and costs. And so in order to expedite the process, because we are on a very tight schedule, which we'll go over in a minute, our recommendation is to allow the school district to give a notice to proceed to the low bid construction manager within a couple days of the 6th, so maybe like the 8th of April, as soon as we're done with our evaluations, as opposed to waiting another week for the school board to formalize that. Something to consider. We can keep going through just something to ponder. We can keep going through this, and we can talk about it after a little bit more. The guaranteed maximum price is submitted on the 1st of May. That's a date that we've selected. We want to give the construction manager approximately 3 weeks to 2 to 3 weeks to basically put out the separate bid packages. So the way this process works is that the construction manager will divide up the different scope of work and then issue it out to various subcontractors. And this process is very open book. So they'll reach out to, let's say, masons, and they'll reach out to guys who install acoustical tile, and they'll reach out to guys who install elevators, and they'll get all their prices in, and they'll bring it back and say, okay, these are the prices that we all got, and this is the guaranteed maximum price that we are providing for the project, and you get to see all the prices that come in, which is a different process than a general contractor. You don't see any of that.
Is the abatement part of that as well?
No, it's an entirely separate thing that the school district is handling separately. So the phase 1 construction period, right now, as soon as the abatement work is complete, this work would begin. So that's July 6th to August 18th. So you can see that's a pretty tight time frame. Phase 2 is June 13th to August 13th. Again, as soon as the school gets out to or August 19th, just allowing some time a little bit before school starts. So basically a 2-month period. And that's in 2016. And then on the cost estimate, we're looking at roughly $650,000 for the estimated construction cost. We've got an allowance in here for $50,000 for the hazardous materials abatement. We are estimating approximately $176,000 for the construction management fee and general conditions. We've got an estimated subtotal construction cost altogether of $873,000. And then soft costs, which include owner's contingency, architect engineering fees, legal, permitting, and so on, for a total of $1.1 million. And then as far as the schedule goes, we are basically at this point right here where we have, we're expecting the proposals to come in. We have the bid opening, and then awarding the contract to the selected construction manager. And 1st of May, we talked about the guaranteed maximum price. We review and accept it by the first week in May, and then we hold a pre-construction meeting with the contractor, make sure he's got all his ducks in a row and ready to get started. And then this is a construction schedule that we talked about, phase 1 and phase 2.
And I'm going to pull up the funding. If there's questions now while I'm pulling that up, that'll be next.
So I don't know if anyone has any questions on anything that I've presented so far.
One quick one on the soft costs as a percentage of the project. That seems, I don't know what's standard for that, because that seemed to be a high percentage relative to the cost that you indicated at the top. You had like 647 or something, and it's like 245 for soft costs. That seems like a high percentage.
Yeah, I believe that the overall construction cost was 873.
I think I was looking at the top number on that.
Yeah.
647.
So the soft costs typically have 10% in there for owner's contingency. You want to keep at least that for the, especially under a renovation project. Then we have the AE fees and legal fees and clerk fees. I don't know what the overall percentage is, but I can tell you that with a renovation project like this, where you have so many unknowns and there's quite a bit involved, those costs are what they are. Like I said, I don't know what the overall total is, but it's a combination of all those different line items.
Nodding.
It's the extra asbestos that they're gonna find. That's for that. Because we know they will.
And I think I had a question about the delay between May 1st and the July start date, but I think you answered that on your last slide. A lot of that's prep work.
Oh, it's not coming up.
It's
on
not?
my little spreadsheet here. It's here, but not there.
You do that control all of that? Is that?
And will the construction accommodate any summer activities at the high school? I don't know if you can answer that, Heather.
No, we're gonna pretty much have to close. Seriously? There's no.
So what do we give up? I mean,
Especially because of the.
what would normally go on that can't go on?
RAC has made alternative plans with some of the programming that we run here. We'll have to work with the crew in terms of the parts group. I think you better off answering that in terms of just.
Different cleaning schedules, like gym's gonna be not having any access to the schools for safety.
So in terms of, and the only other thing that we have to keep an eye on is we do a fair amount of enrollment and relocation work for families from out of district during the summer. So we're just gonna have to finesse that.
What's happening too is the cafeteria, these two, cafeteria 1 and 2 will be used to store, this one will be used to store construction materials for that area right there. Cafeteria 2 will be used to store the classroom items and everything else there. So the cafeterias will be closed. The kitchen, there'll be access to the kitchen. I think you probably said all the rec programs have been repositioned to our other schools. Essentially, the middle school's really busy, but also Chamberlain and Central have picked up some of those. And I know we have no friends with people who want to use the gym because it's come up quite a bit, but because we are also doing this and closing some bathrooms and doing windows, and at least for a part of the summer, the gym is just not available.
And do we lose that for 2 summers or just 1?
One for sure this year, it's because of the hazardous abatement is I think that next year the elevator will be off to the side of the gym, and I think it could be open. We'd have to work with exits and entrances. Yes.
Much more likely in year 2 than this year, for sure.
Yeah, so people know. We're waiting for this process to go through, and then we'll start publishing everyone the exact. For instance, my office, half of my office has no power.
Power is going to be shut down for a lot of the building or parts of the building.
Yeah, so there's some things that have to move. So the proceeds to get to the $1,116,000. We had bond proceeds that are dedicated to the elevator of $600,000. We've had bond proceeds that we've scaled back the bathroom upgrade to use money for this project. The facilities budget that we went to the voters with $280,000. This year's budget has $20,000 more for professional services, mechanical engineering, that kind of thing. Our legal budget is pretty small, so we're just using $5,000, and then the contingency is $60,000 from next year. And so the out-of-pocket funding is a subtotal there of $1,096,800,000. Now, when we fashioned this, we tried to do it as closely as possible as if state funding was involved, using those rules. It's not. I checked in with the director of, she does a lot of things now for audits, but if there was state funding, she'd be in charge of this process. She said if a state funding was there, they would get the resume of our projected owner's project manager, clerk of the works, another title, and see if that person was qualified. We're proposing, because this is a very pricey project, that Bart does the work, Bart Naselli. I think David can speak more to that than I can, but we have confidence that he can do this job, and so that's where we could contribute a little bit more to get the price down a little bit. And it's not required by the state, but we talked about that earlier.
John, what are the responsibilities of the clerk of the works?
To report to the board on progress, billings, that kind of thing.
Is there an oversight of the project responsibility too, and a coordination of those efforts?
Yes, working with Rob and the construction manager.
Yeah, I mean, basically the clerk of the works' job is to be the kind of eyes and ears for the owner, for the school district. So he would, be responsible for taking photographs, documenting, okay, who's on site today, how many people, how many men are here, giving a, we would be here quite often. He would be in touch with us, very similar to what the way it worked at the Tuttle Middle School. We kind of worked in a similar capacity over there.
Do we have additional exposure using one of our own employees?
I would say, I think we have exposure, but it's nothing that we haven't done already. And I think, as Rob said, and Bart appropriately integrated, I would say extremely well with the middle school project. Again, this is a much different scope, but it's over 2 years. And, that work is important to us. We expect that the construction manager, all the processes, we're going to watch, but there's always a safety question. There's always, something that might be happening with somebody who might be on site that had, that's a sub or something of that nature. So again, Bart and his crew are our eyes and ears, and we think that, again, we have a good track record of success there, so we feel good about that.
I did discuss it with Bob Fletcher, and he had the same observation that I had without me saying it, that if we had another clerk of the works, it'd be one more layer of email to get people together, whereas Bart can talk to Rob or talk to whoever the construction manager is or me, and then we'd have to get this other person in the loop. And I of course want to save the $20,000, and I know Bart's capable, but he also has a staff that he doesn't have to be taking the pictures and that kind of thing. So that's just, that's all I'll say about it.
So just to clarify for me on this, I know when we went out to repurpose the bond, we indicated the projects in general, but we didn't delineate those in the vote on the ballot item as to what the community was approving. Did we believe we could do the whole project for $600,000 at that time?
We did. We had an estimate.
When we went out initially.
Right, it wasn't, we didn't pay for an estimate of this building, we had the other elevator to go with, and we talked with some architects about it. And if it was just gonna be the elevator could be done in 2 months, we'd still have other costs involved, so we underestimated somewhat. But we did ask the question, yes.
The other thing that came up during our meeting was that bathroom upgrade, what we thought was gonna be the bathrooms upgraded is not gonna be the bathrooms. It's that one little bathroom over there. So, I mean, I think the community thinks our bathrooms are gonna be done.
Well, we know, yeah, I mean, I know the board's been informed about that. I do think this is a doubling, basically, from what originally was talked about, and not only in dollars, but in time as well. I think this has been communicated, but it might at some point be appropriate to sort of be explicit about what the
What was
original
initially
repurposing
intended.
of the bond, and sort of what we discovered that was new, and how we're modifying that, and just for transparency's sake. I don't think any of this is out of line, but I do recall that we had estimated it, doing the whole thing at about $600,000, and then we went through the process of having project management and the bathroom issue and redeploying that. So there've been enough changes to what got communicated to the community early on that I think we owe it just some clarification.
Sure. We've had the 6 projects, the 2 roofs were done last summer. The middle school elevator was done successfully this winter, so that was the on plan. The windows with the discovery of the PCBs is the other part of that article that has to be written.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Rob, you brought up the issue of sort of delegating authority on approving the low bidder. Do we know anything, David, about if the dollar amount requires the board to go through an open bid process and warning, does that affect the approval process as well?
I don't think so. I think if the board, you have controls in place. You can delegate authority for me to approve based on the information, that's been shared. So we're gonna open up the bids. You're gonna have 2.
Yep.
And you know that it's gonna exceed what I can approve, but you've delegated the ability for me to approve the low bidder essentially, because they're pre-qualified.
Right.
Is really what you're asking.
Right.
Or the board would be delegating to me. So I don't know that I'm answering it.
Well, it's confusing to me that the board needs to be involved in opening the bids but could delegate the authority for approval.
Right, and we definitely checked,
You
you
have to
have to be there for opening.
Because of
So,
the magnitude of the project.
right, I think the answer would be, I'll check with Bob Flesher right away, so that you know, if that's available.
Either that or we figure out, it can be a special, it can be a phone board meeting
Telephonic or-
that can have at least 3 members that make that approval. That may be the easiest plan. The important thing is that we're on a very tight timeline, and, even waiting to the next board meeting puts us out of sync.
So our presumption is that these bids we're gonna get on Monday are going to be substantially apples to apples and not seriously different from each other? Is that the expectation?
That is the expectation. I mean, that's the way we've set out the RFP. We specifically have a chart that
So-
we ask them to fill in. So
So will it be obvious when we open the bids if that's not the case?
it should be, sometimes contractors say, well, I've excluded this, or.
Yeah,
or
right.
Or I didn't do this, and so that's the type of thing that we'll be mostly looking at, if they have any sort of that sort of language.
Because Elizabeth, I think that our ability to delegate that is going to depend upon there not being any wild divergences between these two things. I mean, I think that's going to beg for a sort of a follow-on process.
Well, the alternative would be, as you said, full meeting.
Yeah.
And we rely on Rob, as part of his contract, he's responsible to review these thoroughly. So maybe that's our better course. And then that way, there's no question if.
Yeah, I understand the idea to expedite it, but I think we have a responsibility that we make sure that we bound what we've delegated
Right.
appropriately, okay?
Right.
And as far as clerk of the works, what action do we have to take on that? And when?
I don't think there's an action if we, I don't think there
You've
is.
announced your intention, and if no one objects, that's where you're gonna go? Is that what's happening?
Well, yes, I think that's.
Our identified plan.
Okay.
I'm not trying to take over.
I mean, part of this is.
No, I just want to understand what you're
Part of
looking
this is a
for.
legal obligation, around the bidding, the bid opening, and the requirements. The other part is exposure and communication to the public on the magnitude of the project, and you, the board, first, but by public. I mean, this is a big
Yeah.
project, and we were initially trying to do this in 1 year. We know it has to be over 2. We're pushing it at that, and then how we're gonna manage it. So it's kind of in those three buckets. And I think we've covered our bases fairly well. There's always, some level of concern around if we identified everything. And again, we've had good people on site doing a lot of the good pre-work, so I think we've got it down, but,
I would agree. I think a call with the board at a minimum to approve that is the right way to go.
So I think we would line that up. That takes any of the guessing out of it. It remains a board action. It's a board-required opening, and we'll make it a board approval. And if we need to do that on that very next day, I'll work through Delina to see
Well,
who's available.
it's really contingent on Rob's assessment of the 2 bids,
Right.
right?
Maybe set April 9th, or,
I was gonna say the 8th.
you were, okay.
So if that's workable, we'll work with the board and with Rob and through Delina to set up who would be available on 8th or 9th, or both, to do that.
Yeah, and I think we're fortunate as a district to have somebody like Bart who knows these facilities inside and out to step up in that role. So I think that's exciting, and I think that's a real asset, because having, like you said, John, having another party come in who doesn't have the intimate knowledge of our operations or facilities, I think we will be advantaged in that regard, so.
So Bart, you're shaking your head, but are you sure you want to shake your head? Or you want to...
I don't know if anyone's really asked you, Bart. This may be the first time you hear that.
Is he shaking his head, or is he just shaking?
Well, he's had a fair amount of other experiences.
Yeah, right. No.
All right. Well, thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rob.
Rob.
Thanks, Bob.
And Bart.
And Bart.
You know more about elevators now as time goes on, and you'll know more as time goes on.
Yeah, you really want to have fun with that, put together all of the
Yeah.
projects that have been done around school that are in the last.
Yeah.
You are, okay, I'll turn it
Yeah.
on.
I have to say, Patrick, the one thing that's, well, this isn't unique to you necessarily, it's for the district, but as I'm looking at this number, I keep thinking of the turf field.
I know.
Exactly.
Elizabeth, one other thing that was in there was the board, or I think acceptance of the guaranteed
Guaranteed maximum price.
maximum. That's also a board action, I assume. That's scheduled for a board meeting day anyway. It's May 6th is what's
Right.
on the list.
Right, but that will roll into that bid opening.
No, that's.
That will roll in, I believe, to the same action at the same time, right,
No,
John?
it comes later.
So
May
6th.
May 6th. I think,
After
is
they.
scheduled.
Oh, the May, I thought you said you were
Shot
talking
at
about
it,
8.
yeah.
No, I think it's just one
Yeah.
more thing we're gonna have to put on that.
Right,
agenda.
so they, as Rob said, they'll come up with their responses from their bidders, they'll come up with that guaranteed maximum price, and you have, yeah. I was mixing up your date.
Okay, unless there's any other questions or comments on the elevator project, we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Yep, so first thing in there is about our audits and appointing a board member to do that selection. So, again, there needs to be an action specifically on that.
And do you want to just give a quick background?
Yeah.
Just for the public?
So the business office, as it says here, has received results of 2 audits and the management letter. And in addition, we want to see additional information. And so what we'd like to be able to do is have a board member able to review that. And John, I want to just make sure around the audit.
This is different. This is not the audit. This is to select an auditor.
Yes.
Yes,
That's with the
we're
city.
in with the city, and,
Right.
and the auditor that we've had in the past, we re-up that. Well, not every
Well,
year,
it
but
was a
we've done a 3-year
with
contract.
2 renewals, and we're done.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the city will be managing that process, correct? Or-
Yes.
Okay.
But they've given us a lot of availability for input.
Yeah.
So we generated the RFP for them and that kind of thing.
Well, and I would say that's consistent with what we did the last go-round, and I think, Julie, you served on that, perhaps with John?
Agnes did.
Or,
Oh, what did I do?
No.
well, you were on the
SEI.
Oh,
SEI,
the
you were, so
investment,
this
okay.
is on the audit side, so,
Yeah.
yeah. So we need a member, right, John?
Yes, there'd be Amity Denton, a school board member, and a city council member, and Tom Hubbard.
And can you describe the commitment in terms of maybe meetings or hours or?
Yeah, I think there's, reviewing the RFPs is probably a 2-hour job. I anticipate 3 or 4. Then, if that's what we get, there'd be interviews, an hour interview with each applicant.
All in one day?
It'd be in a space of a couple days, at the end of April. And then a discussion. It isn't a very significant time commitment. I think that Amity and Tom's gonna have Sue Dory help him over there. I think their work is pretty important because they know the accounting, and if they see something that's different, they can point that out. So.
Is this a process where Tom and Amity could recommend maybe the top 2 if there's as many as 4, or even the top 1 with some selection criteria?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So there's less
I'm just trying to
streamline it.
No, I understand.
about my fellow colleagues.
Right, I understand, yeah.
I say we nominate Martin.
I knew that was coming.
Nice, Julie.
I mean, hey, if you're not here.
I think there's something we could commit him to that's more substantial.
That's true. And he is dealing with that ed
Well,
bill tonight.
do we have any board members who would be interested in participating in the full process, or do we want to look at an alternative?
I'd be interested, and I would have the time to do it, so
So
Great.
if everybody's okay, Dan will be our board representative.
Oh, that'd be great.
Great,
Yes. Thank you.
good.
once again, I feel great about this because city charter says they pick the auditor, so we're getting a lot for this.
Good. And I know you were starting to talk
Yeah, well,
about
again, there's
the
the-
audit itself.
Right, and so there's layout of other information. So again, I was kind of going through one of which was we've just covered. Again, we're going to come back to you with some additional findings in response of the audits that we've had. So again, just outlining some of, under the word audits, where we're at, that's all.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I cut you off there.
That's
I
all
thought
right.
it was more
No,
the
no, that's
appoint the
fine.
board member. So do we don't have action relative to the audit at this point, correct?
Correct. Right now, we don't. We'll be back at the next, well, maybe 6th, John, right? We're going to come back with some added
Not the
management
6th.
left.
No, it'd be
May.
That's our work
The
session.
15th, right?
You keep
15th
trying
or.
to add on to the work session.
Yeah, I'm trying to add more
Would
to
you
that.
stop?
The question is, the auditors can come to a meeting, and if you want them here, it's okay, we can still ask them there. That's part of what we paid for, so they offered. And if not, then we can schedule, I'll go through it in detail at a time that's good.
We can make that decision. I mean, would the board like to have them to come and present kind of the findings
Are
and
they
summary?
presenting to the city council anytime?
They've done that.
Oh, they have.
Yeah, they did that already.
I know you're trying to conserve time. We could ask for a summary.
Well, my only thought is they could not make the last meeting.
Right.
We tried to get them live, right?
No,
We
he
had some
he
scheduling.
eventually came, didn't he?
That was our SEI.
Oh,
That was
that
our
was SEI.
investment, yeah, we have these two.
Sure it wasn't the auditor?
No, they were
Yeah,
here.
He came.
Yeah, he came last year, especially, we had it right in this room
Yeah,
about a year ago.
You sat right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess my feeling is, given that we're going to be going through an RFP process for an auditor service, that maybe we just have a recap from you, John, or the business office.
Okay.
It's fine.
Hey, so Martin wants to know if you want him to come. He could be here by 9.
I would probably suggest that he runs the risk of being volunteered for something, but
Yeah.
send him home.
Okay.
Business, okay.
Great. And the quick summary on, I mean, I know you're going to get this, but you've received the management letter, correct?
Yes, and I did a response there too. And we did also receive an update on our federal funds. The IDEA audit that was pretty extensive that they were coming back to check. And we were compliant in 4 of the 5 areas. One was staff documentation, and we used a timesheet that had the wrong heading. So I was thankful that that was what they found, because who used the right heading makes everything count, so. there's-
So it's just a that time certification
Yes, time
report?
certificate, right.
That's what that is?
Mhm.
How often is that audit done?
Well, it wasn't done for many years. The state audits the IDEA because it's pass-through money. So we're not on their radar every year. But we had a very extensive audit that took a year, and it was in our policy 2.4 last time. All the things they were going to follow up on. So I don't think we're due for a while.
I'm assuming that we categorize that as an insignificant finding.
Oh, I hope you do.
I'm resisting the urge to write to Governor Shumlin with an opportunity to save some budget money.
So then the second part of the superintendent's report is about procedures for granting leave, and I understand why I was not here last meeting. There were some questions that came up around, decision-making on my end around, how that moves forward or not. And so I just outlined fairly quickly under my report how that happens. Obviously, there's more conversation embedded in making those decisions, but generally, obviously, the teacher makes a request, the principal and the supervisor reviews the request and makes a recommendation, in this case, either to the principal and the principal then to me. again, pretty clear that the support of the recommendation is based on the ability to hire a replacement. That's critical. So again, we want to ensure that opportunities that students have continue in the most appropriate way. And also that we're able to fill the position, because again, sometimes they're specialty positions, sometimes the time frame could be a significant part of that. Contractually, we do have a March 1 obligation to notify. Again, we do that because if we get much later, then we begin to look into the loss of the pool of applicants that might be able to fill the position. If it's after that, it's still in play that we'll consider that. And I think important to say, ability to find a replacement that's going to continue to advance the school and district, and what is going to be the kind of professional learning to grant the leave as well. So it's not, again, that's in part in play too. And again, a lot of the conversations that we have is around that professional learning. What's going to be the response, the give back to the district if a year leave is granted. Again, this year leave is not, it's an unpaid leave, but it's an opportunity to come back. The individual that fills a position is a 1-year only position, which clearly is a less attractive position than a more known, what we would say a permanent position, if you will, although there's no such thing as really a permanent, right? So anyway, those are the things that walk into the decision. It's hard because usually the people who want to go out are people that we that we have, great connection with and are doing good work. Again, this is a conversation that happens with the principals and the employee around engaging them in ideas and opportunities to grow, and or how it will benefit the school / the district. So those are the procedures and the guidelines that we typically go through. Questions?
Well, first I'll make an observation. I really think that there's the ability to grow and bring increased value back to the district should be a dominant factor in what's going on. And in fact, for the right situation, I think we ought to be willing to stretch to make that happen if we're pretty sure that that's going to work. But having said that, and I would like to see that when we get those recommendations, that be clearly spelled out, because I think that's been a little weak in what we've seen in terms of the requests by the time they get to us. I mean, there may be somebody that understands it in detail, but it isn't transparent to us. So, but I think that should be a dominant factor. But having said that, I also get concerned that I think we ought to also put some kind of limits on how many people can be out at any one time on this kind of a leave of absence. I mean, I'm open to suggestions as to what's a sensible number, but maybe it's not one, but I doubt that it's a dozen, okay? So I don't know where the limit should be.
Yeah,
So.
I would say I honor that observation, but that's part of what you asked me to do, is to ensure that we're advancing in all areas, that we can continue to accommodate the students appropriately and respectfully in the school, but at the same time ensure that we're moving the district forward. And sometimes, currently what we have is for professional growth is limited, and we do have in the contract sabbatical leave, which is paid, which we have not exercised, to my knowledge, during my time in the district in the 10 years. So there's a fine balance, and I get that. I get that, and I can certainly.
Well, my only concern is that if we had for some reason, a fistful of viable, excellent candidates in 1 year, and you have to down select, I mean, that'd be a good thing to have to do, but for those other people, they ought to understand that, look, that's my only concern. I mean,
Yeah.
okay?
Absolutely.
Because you've got in here the requirement that you're not going to, that quality is not going to be overly compromised in what's going on here. I
Right.
presume if somebody's really, really
Yeah.
good, it's going to be hard to get
Yeah,
somebody to
I
come in
don't-
for a year who's equally really.
Yeah, I don't want to
really
downplay the year, but, because there are people out there that are excellent, that will come in
Yeah,
on that
no.
year leave. But I want to be clear that it's a little bit less attractive for somebody,
I get
but it's a
it.
great opportunity
I
in
get
some
it.
ways. Yeah, so.
Do we have any information on kind of the numbers of folks who've taken leave on an annual basis?
I have not tracked that. I mean, we have not had we haven't had 5. We've had a couple, pretty much during my time, we've had 1 or 2 almost every year that we've honored, and we've benefited greatly. And some of you know, John Painter, for instance, is an example of being out on leave, granted leave, and you kind of know what's happening there. So the answer is no, I don't have the exact numbers, but probably a good thing for me to just keep track of and be able to articulate to the board. I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, and I don't even know if this is a phenomena, but do we know that most folks come back from leave too?
So last year, isn't it last year that we had someone ask for a second year? And that's when all these questions came up.
Yeah.
And it did come to us from you, right? I know it came to us, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I think perhaps
The request
there
for
was a
second year.
request, and I think in that particular case, I can't remember exactly, but I asked that you not approve. It came to you, but I asked that you not, based on kind of the process, that unless there's a compelling reason, I don't want to say no, never, but I think when you enter into a second year, we're also holding open a position that makes it difficult for somebody who's done a good job in year 1.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to do this again, to me, hold open another 1 year only thing. So I don't want to say no, never, because again, part of the conversation needs to be around what's going to advance the district, what's going to help the individual grow with some assurances they're going to come back. But I'm not in favor, in a general sense, of 2 years. I think it really is not right.
And I'm struggling with if administrators or the superintendent have gone through this process, and I would add to it what you've said, just sort of the duration of the leave, and then some of the other variables you talked about. But I'm finding it hard to understand where the board would approve or deny it, on what basis.
I don't know, that's just the way we've done it, it's been practice, because it's a contractual obligation and right in the collective bargaining agreement, that's the way we've done it. So I think it's important around employment, you also are gonna see, you need to appoint the leave, and we're gonna fill it with a 1 year only contractual. So I think, from my perspective, it needs to be there. I respect what you're saying. You kind of feel like you're a rubber stamp a little bit.
Well, no, it's not that as much as saying if you're following the procedures, it's, I don't know on what basis we would approve or deny it.
So let me think about that a little bit more, maybe under policy governance particularly. This is an area where you hold me accountable to the procedures as noted on, and
Yeah, with-
administrators on leave of absence.
With appropriate limitations.
Yeah, I'm just, not
Yeah.
thinking that through that lens maybe enough,
Yeah,
so.
I like that.
Yeah, let me think that through. Thank you for the feedback.
Good. All right, administrative reports.
So how are we doing on time, Julie? Are we a little behind? Not too
No.
bad? So we're all right.
Yep.
So we're lucky enough to have Lee Lanfear here to help with kind of the school's out report, and then soon thereafter, the education quality standards. We've got both Stuart and Patrick here as well. So I think we'll stay right in that order since we're on time, if that's okay. So Lee, welcome, and John, I'll let you folks take it over.
Sure, so, thanks for having me.
Does everybody know Lee? Okay.
So I don't know, have you had a chance to look at this? I'm sure you have. Big changes this year in our program. We did away with our enrollment policy of, a registration policy that is, of having people line up in front of the school and enroll in the program and wait all day to get into the program. And we went with a lottery system. But in doing that, we also expanded numbers as well. And so we were actually, with that expansion, able to enroll all the families that signed up at the beginning of the year, which hasn't happened in my time here, so 13 years, so I'm pretty proud of that. We added a kindergarten component to our program to kind of offset the huge numbers that we took on. Allowed us to keep the same general number of kids in program for the main group, and then we have a kindergarten group at 2 of the schools with 20 kids in each of those programs. So those are really great. Parents love it because they're, as a parent of a kindergartner, you worry about sending your kids in with the bigger kids, and so we're able to offer more age-appropriate activities. So that's been a really great addition. A lot of good feedback from that. Tuttle program is showing a general trend of declining enrollment around this time of year. And I know the board's asked about the Tuttle program quite a bit. So we've kind of made some changes on the fly to accommodate for the loss in revenue there. We have our site director taking a couple of days off of the program, having it run just with one staff person. But I did mention that it is very popular at the beginning of the year, and it's a nice transition for families and for kids who, again, a lot like the kindergarten family, you're often worried about kids going into the 5th grade and not sure what the opportunities are after school. And so we kind of offer a nice transition for kids, and as they become more comfortable with the offerings, as parents maybe become more comfortable with kids going home after school, those numbers dwindle a little bit. So David and I have discussed a plan where we could offer the program at the beginning of the year, and as the program starts to dwindle a little bit, we could have the remaining kids bus back to their elementary schools to participate as counselors in training or junior counselors at the elementary schools. So we can even work that into the curriculum where we're training them how to be leaders, and I think it could be a good opportunity without losing what we have, because it is, as I mentioned, a crucial service for a small group of kids. So there's that. Our summer camps, and I might need you guys to tell me if I'm going too long, because I could talk forever about our summer camps. We've been doing a summer learning component in our summer camps for, I think this will be the 5th year now. Started off with just reading, getting kids practicing reading, so that to help prevent the summer slide where kids regress in the summer. And we've now built that up. We have a full hour of literacy in the morning and a full hour of math in the morning, all run under a camp experience. It's a lot of fun. Kids enjoy it. There's lots of choices built in, so they're choosing different activities. And we also had the special education extended school year program actually enveloped into that program with just phenomenal success. I mean, I don't have a lot of numbers. I've had a couple of kids that I've heard about and that have not regressed. We had 2 kids in particular who were really low flyers who participated in our program for the whole summer, and both of those kids did not regress for the first time in 5 years. So it's feeling pretty proud about it, and the kids love it. And I put a quote in here from one of the ESY kids who was, his mom's like, he keeps talking about this when he gets home. He loves camp so much. He thinks it's camp, but it really is a camp experience. It's a fully inclusive model, which we're really proud of.
So I just want to interject that a little bit, Lee. And again, hats off to Lee. Again, this is all about what we want, right? We want kids to be excited about ongoing learning throughout the year. A lot of what happens in our School Without program during the school year is exactly that, similar kind of process where which they connect and they have choices. But adding the ESY, again, in collaboration with both Stuart and Joanne Godak and Lee, coming up with that, it is now something that people are clamoring to and wanting to emulate. And in fact, our Schools Out program, I would say across the state right now, people are wanting to emulate. And we're really proud of it. I think, we want kids to be able to go home and be excited, but there's wonderful opportunities, different than what's maybe happening in their classroom, but choices and all of the opportunities that we provide. And again, really the focus on the summer time program has been just immense, and that we weren't quite sure how that would go. But again, I think that's just one quote, but what we've heard throughout the summer and from parents primarily have been the kids just can't wait to go. And that's not been the case for our extended year learning students in the past. So.
Yeah, and so that model also we've carried over in the after-school program. We have a lot of learning opportunities for kiddos that are fun and engaging, and support the learning that's happening during the school day as well. So, that's kind of my part. Any questions about anything? Anything you want to add, John?
Again, I think it's fair to say that likely the board, a lot of you probably have some exposure to the Schools Out program over the years, or have had some sharing of activity. There's a lot to be said. We've got some, transportation has always been a hard thing around Connected, and that's because it always happens at the time of the day, and there's been, we've just received a bus as a result of some fundraising that was done coordinated through the district that is going to provide, I think, a great opportunity for continued added connection. You know, trips and field trips and after-school hiking and things like that, which really, you know, bring a great opportunity to those students. So
yeah, we're really excited about the bus. We just went over and checked it out. I've got 2 of our staff who are getting certified to drive the bus, getting a CDL, so that we can drive the bus to a location, and then as opposed to having a bus driver sit on the bus and read a book and collect a paycheck. You know, I've no disrespect to our bus drivers because they're awesome, but you know, we can put that person, you know, out to the field working with the kids and being productive. So, really excited about it. And as opposed to driving a giant bus filled with 15 kids that are going to the Humane Society, you know, we've got a full minibus going to the Humane Society.
a minibus with a lift, right? Handicap lift. So we have some good flexibility there, and it's going to be great.
So is there a minimum number, Lee, that you would consider shutting down Tuttle? I mean, you know, a minimum you have to have in order to really make it.
I don't think so. I mean, 1 or 2 kids. I've really shaved it down to just about nothing now as far as what we're spending and you know, staffing. You know, I'm not necessarily completely happy with the curriculum that we're able to offer for that few kids. You know, with the more kids we have, the more we're able to offer kids. So, but they really do seem to love just the hangout time, time to get their homework done, and they're in a safe spot. So those things I can do really cheap. Mm-hmm. So I'm not too worried about it. We could continue to offer it for those, you know, 2 or 3 kids even, and you know, just cut staff towards the end of the year. But this other opportunity, I think, is something that excites me a little bit more, and I think is a little bit more engaging for the kids.
I think the middle school, you know, we're going to watch that. It is, as Lee said, it's developmentally kind of contingent upon the start of the 6th grade experience, and then where children become comfortable with the opportunities. And I think collaboration between Karsten and Paul Yoon and Lee and over here at the high school around opportunities and activities for kids, things like a volleyball club is emerging and a variety of other things, which may, you know, we got to look at how that then impacts kind of the after-school support program for kids as well. So we know it's important. We know that if kids don't have a place to go like that, then we put high anxiety into our guardians around, you know, kids going home and what choices are they making and how we do that. So we have to really be sensitive to how that curtails.
We did start a drop-in style program this year that's brought in other kids here and there. So you know, families will take advantage of that once every 3 or 4 weeks, maybe some families, but still, you know, it only takes 1 or 2 days of no supervision to get into trouble. So you know, it's there for people that need it.
Yeah, I mean, there were criteria that were discussed with the board about sort of under what circumstances that program would be reevaluated. So I do want to, you know, ask David that you kind of re-up those when appropriate. One thing I do like, Lee, is that you have consistently brought pilots into the program. You test those out, and you make pretty quick decisions based on the feedback you're getting from kids and from families. So I think that's really one of the hallmarks of your work, which is really adaptability. The flip side is we're not going to be able to meet everybody's needs, so we're going to look to you to maybe make some tough calls if you need to, because I'm not sure we do anybody any favors setting up something that's cobbled together that ultimately isn't going to prove fruitful for anybody. But again, what I like is you're willing to test a lot of concepts out, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
John?
The finances. We ended the year on a positive note for the first time in 4 years, which was
which is good, and we had projected it came in a little better. The accounts receivable is, we have the budget passed. We're fashioning a way to be effective and not put too much resource into that, but we have to put more into it than we have. The situation is that a lot of the people on that list are, no longer have kids in the system. Some have lost their homes, and the stories we found, going through our attorney a little bit to see some of these, they're not gonna be collectible. So, but what happened with Lee's program, it was small, it grew, it's kind of like if our Chamberlain principal had to collect the taxes to pay the teachers, and that's what Lee was having to do. So we recognized that and put things into place. And Lee's the idea to have credit card payments and debit card payments, that's all from Lee, and we have a good system for that. So we have to catch up with the old, and then we'll be on solid footing. But none of our numbers are inflated. The old, that $60,000 that was of the top 15, that is not in these numbers. We have a allowance for bad debts on the books.
So the FY14 finish should actually be netted for the bad debt then?
No,
It's not.
it's already is netted.
Gotcha, okay.
Yes. So it's not inflated.
So have you already written it off as bad debt expense, or are
Oh,
you
no,
trying to
I
collect
can't.
it?
That'll come to you.
Oh.
So you don't have
I was
to,
just gonna say.
it won't ever be written off unless, I mean, I have some that we could, but I don't want to come, every
Yeah.
meeting, it's, well, this one. So we'll do it systematically, and it'll probably be in the fall, because we have to get somebody on board to really make phone calls, and we had the big push, and then we had a lot going on in the fall.
So in the audit report, one of the things said that they recommended that these things go to collections. That's just,
Well, that's a tough call, but if it depends. We need more contact with the parents or the people to see what their reaction is, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's a
how
little
much
bit.
does it cost to send people to collection? I mean, is it worth it to us? That's the question.
It often isn't.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I think of note too, I ran into somebody last night that was providing child care support for the master visioning meeting last night too. So they were very enthusiastic about what they were doing, which was nice. Yeah.
That's nice that you mentioned that, Elizabeth, because I think we had 10, 11 children that were in there, and the word was the kids didn't want to go home. They were having a great time. So, and I think John actually, I think you went down too.
yeah, we
didn't you,
went
John?
down there and
And said hi and
checked
thank
in
you,
with
yeah.
them.
So
They're pretty
make-
thankful to be there.
Make sure that, the thank you gets there too, yeah.
Good. Thanks.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, John.
Thanks.
So next is education quality standards, and here to share what I'm going to say, another update with you, although I think you need projector too. Both Patrick and Stuart to kind of share where we are today. So welcome, Patrick, to night number 2.
Number 2, this is my 4th time.
Well, I'm saying night number 2.
Oh, you mean
Out.
last night?
Last
Okay,
night tonight.
Social studies, CAS interviews tomorrow is night number 3.
Okay, night number 3.
Hey, whatever. Oh, no, I can email it to you.
Okay, well, it's John Stewart right now, so I just.
Oh,
So you all have a time for a quick coffee break while we pull that up if you want, or a water break.
unless you want to.
No, I can do it.
All right.
I've had it for a long time, but I haven't worn them. Those are the squeakiest darn shoes.
What, squeaky? There's no sneaking up on anybody. That's, here comes the boss! Everybody look busy!
Today in the office, they were like, I felt like, it's making so much noise, so I talking on the phone. So am I supposed to tweet about this while
No,
you're doing this?
No, I just was, so
Mm-hmm.
you're covered.
How many times did you tweet last night, even as you were facilitating? 4?
I tried to do it while I'm actually facilitating. I pushed up.
I saw there was 3 or 4 at least, yeah. We'll wait for Julie here first.
She said to go ahead and get started.
She did? Okay. All right. Okay, Patrick, you're on.
Okay. So, again, I feel like every time I come, I put a lot of information in front of you. Tonight, I'm gonna take an intentional, I put an intentional stop point, and I'm going to give you some samples, and I want you to take a look at them, and then after that, ask me questions. Because part of what I'm trying to do, or part of what we're trying to do is be really thoughtful about this work, but also understand that, what we're producing needs to be understandable and consumable by students, parents, and I think sometimes that even we've made so much progress in the past 18 months on these issues that I think if I took the work we have now and went back in time and put it in front of the faculty 18 months ago, they would be like, what? So that that's obviously pretty positive. But tonight, one of my goals is to get some feedback and questions and reaction to some of the work that we've done. So, this is a little bit of a review, and so for everyone except Pat, the education quality standards are they have the power statute pursuant to BSA 164.9, and that's a lot of our work here is in response to two major shifts that came out of Montpelier. One is the education quality standards, and the other was by way of Act 77. So, per the new education quality standards, every school district in Vermont is compelled to shift the way we determine graduation. The old graduation standard, which has been around for hundreds of years, was this completion of Carnegie units, and the majority of which were distributed in six different areas. The only real significant change from the original Committee of 10, which is a committee of folks from higher ed that established the graduation standards across the country, the only really significant change from their inception to today was the elimination of Latin as a requirement. Other than that, pretty much the graduation requirements for high school from the mid to early 19th century to the 21st century remain the same. So now our new local graduation policy needs to define proficiency-based graduation requirements based on standards adopted by the Board of Education. So those are the Common Core state standards. So that Board of Education is the State Board of Education. Students will graduate based on evidence of progression through a rigorous, relevant, comprehensive learning curriculum. Next slide. And that's a lot of words. But the bottom line is what we are going to be doing is not just saying, okay, you took 4 years of English, which, maybe you got a D-, and we're not going to use that grade and that time in the classroom as a proxy for what you know and can do in determining your ability to earn a diploma. So what we're going to have to do is use a body of evidence collected over time and determine if students are proficient. Go ahead. So this is the part where I want to take a little bit of a break. There are two kinds of proficiencies that are required by the EQS. One kind are called transferable skills, and the other are content area proficiencies. And so the content area proficiencies are in our, what I would call traditional content areas, so English, language arts, math, science, social studies. And the transferable skills proficiencies are cross-cutting, and they go between all the different content areas. And so you know, you folks are familiar with this kind of thinking because of the work you did with the ENDS policy. So we have ENDS policies that are specific to content areas, and then we also have ENDS policies that are, I think we call them dispositions for learning. And so those are your cross-cutting, and those would be your transferable skills. And so so the first thing I want to hand out is a copy of our sample draft. Can I say that again? Sample draft. Because as you know, only the board can set graduation standards and set graduation policies. So as we move along doing this work, it's important that I communicate with everyone that, you know, eventually we are going to have to go through the policy development process in order for these to become adopted. And so that's going to include, you know, public meetings, et cetera, all that developing policy. So these transferable skills, we're not going to spend a lot of time on them because you're going to see them appear again in the next document that I'm going to hand out. So one really important thing that I want you to notice on the transferable skills is on the leftmost column, it says ENDS policy and graduation proficiency. And so that's where you'll see the transferable skill listed, but you'll also see the reference to the SBE, stands for South Burlington ENDS. And so we had a crosswalk with these graduation proficiencies, which are part of a state document. And then we cross-referenced it with all of our South Burlington ENDS policies. And so I think that's an important thing to make note of.
And just one last little piece within that, because we've had some of this discussion, the state is building rubrics for every one of these indicators that are related to the transferable skills. So, and in fact, assessments for clear and effective communication, creative and practical problem solving, and informed and integrative thinking. That's also a process for those three that the state is engaged in now. And we have some people on the clear and effective communication committee for the state.
And you know, in addition, and I think I said this before, we're part of a grant that's provided a leadership team, a K-12 leadership team, with 2 days per month of professional development specifically in these areas. Actually, Stuart was there all day today. It's again tomorrow. So that's ongoing, and that's where we're learning about a lot.
And
of this.
Patrick, we have our elementary as well as middle and high school representation, which is really quite a, I mean, some of the administrative have provided me feedback that says, you know, this is really, it's a lot of time away, and we're working through that, but it's been really beneficial.
Yeah,
what I've heard.
it's great. And yeah, Holly's there, Carson's there, I'm typically there. Tim Weil is there, Lissa McDonald.
And Kristen Romack.
And the teacher, right?
And tomorrow, actually, the piece we're really focusing on, so Patrick, you know, is doing this very high school, because of course, in the end, it is the graduation requirements, but actually our work tomorrow really is about how to continue to bring this to the other schools. And Patrick did a presentation at the middle school last week. I'm going to be doing some presentation at the elementary schools to bring our teachers on board. Obviously, it's draft, because we can't say these are the proficiencies, obviously, until that's the policy. So it does, you know, make one of those things where you're moving on several different planes as once, but we're used to that.
So, so these are our draft mathematical content area proficiencies. And so I'll just explain the format of this document, and then I want you to spend some time reading it and ask me questions. So the leftmost column are is the actual proficiency, and you'll also see the cross-referenced again with the ENDS policy. And then in the next column are the performance indicators, and those are ways that students can show that they're proficient in this area. The next column talks about pathways. So right now, the dominant pathway that we're expressing are the courses that our students are going to use to attain those proficiencies. as I said in this presentation a number of times before, that work is going to be ongoing. So we expect those pathways to continue to increase. And out of the gate, the pathways that we're including our courses, 5, 7, 10 years hence, we expect that there'll be ever increasing pathways for students to show that they're proficient. If you look on the far right, there's required experiences, and that's where we just made a note of the current graduation requirement relative to mathematics, which is currently 3 credits required, including algebra. So if you could just take a look at this. Oh, the last thing I'll point out before you spend some time with the document is if you look at the final 2 pages, you'll see where there are graduation proficiencies shown in the mathematics document that are transferable skills. So they said, what says TS1, TS2? So we had a fair amount of discussion about how we were going to guarantee that transferable skills were treated as significant elements of our assessment program. And so we thought, could we just have the transferable skill documents and the content area documents? And we felt like we would be predisposed to focus on the content area documents, because that's what high schools do. And we would, transferable skills would kind of play second fiddle to that. So in the department documents, we are including the transferable skills as they relate to that content area. And when these departments develop their assessment plans for the proficiencies, they are responsible to assess the transferable skills in those areas too. Transferable skills are going to show up all across the program. So just because they're here in the math, just because clear and effective communication is here in the mathematics one, these documents exist for every content area right now, and I can tell you that clear and effective communication exists in almost all of them. So I want to give you 5 minutes to flip through these documents, and then I'd like to answer some questions.
And I just want to say, so these are, when you look at those performance indicators, for graduation proficiency, eventually, on the theory that express, students use mathematics to express relationships between quantities, is the graduation proficiencies. We would have the 8th grade performance indicators, we would have the 5th grade performance indicators, and then within their schools, they would determine what are the 3rd grade performance indicators and so on. So in the end, people will be working towards the same proficiency with indicators that are developmentally appropriate for that grade level.
One quick question on including the transferable skills kind of in aggregate. I understand what you're saying, Patrick, that it's likely they're going to show up in every content area in some form or fashion. Was there any discussion whether or not specific elements of a transferable skill should be included in content areas, like just a finer cut at it, so where it's more relevant? Like if I look at clear and effective communication in mathematics, I would assume maybe using evidence like B and C might be more relevant to math, or most relevant to the mathematics area.
Yes, they're not. Yes, that's definitely that's definitely going to happen, and where you're really going to see that show up is in the assessment. And so, I don't want
But also, Patrick, so each department is working on these. So actually, the science people have done a little bit more of what you're talking about, Elizabeth. So again, these are all drafts, it's just one model. But in the science, they've kind of really specifically looked at the indicators and the transferable skills that are related to science. And I know from talking to Alyssa today at the meeting, that's part of the ongoing discussion, what grain size.
Because I almost feel like some of the work here is to exclude transferable skills that aren't kind of
right.
Mom and apple pie, vanilla type things, and get really deliberate, so in this content area, you're going to focus on these 2 transferable skills under communication.
And importantly, when we talk about communication or when we talk about writing, if you are writing as a scientist, then that's a certain type of writing. If you are writing as a historian, that's another type of writing. And so when we see clear and effective communication, then the same is true for speaking and listening, et cetera. So when we see those kinds of transferable skills appear in different places, they actually take on different forms. And so we have dabbled in this development of assessments, and I talked a little bit about those performance task assessments that we're going to use to determine whether students are proficient or not. And those assessments will often, not always, assess content and transferable skills at the same time. And so it's not like, oh, okay, now I'm going to assess your clear and effective communication math students. It's, here's a performance task that relates to the application of trigonometric functions that also is going to be assessing you on
Logic or, yes.
your ability to apply knowledge in a familiar and new context.
So if I'm a student, do I need to find a way to put a check mark at each one of these blocks? What do I?
Yes and no. I mean, I think if that's where the pathways are important. So, for example, if you are a student, you came to me and said, "So how am I going to graduate?"
Right.
Then my answer to you would be, you need to make sure that you are choosing a path that is going to allow for you to show that you're proficient in all of our areas of proficiency. So just to look at math, for example. Right now, the pathways are listed under, let's look at Express, the first graduation proficiency. Well, Mathematics Course 1 Plus, Course 1 Level 1, and Course 1 Level 2 are all going to have performance assessments that are going to give students a shot at showing that they're proficient under the Express graduation proficiency. And you can go to the next one.
So just so I understand, a performance assessment on each one of these would be the thing that nails in that I'm competent, proficient?
Yes.
That's what it is?
Right.
Okay.
And then math is a little bit different because it's a tightly articulated linear curriculum. It's a little bit more spiraled in some of the other content areas. But I kind of picked math for that reason because the path is pretty clear to see. So when you look at Solve, that's Mathematics Course 2, so your performance indicators and your performance assessments are in Mathematics Course 2 are going to give you the opportunity to show that you're proficient in that area, which is solving problems using a variety of mathematical methods. And then when you look at Apply, there's your Mathematics Course 3, plus all of our courses that students typically take as a fourth year of math, or if you say that math starts in 8th grade, which for many kids high school math does, that's kind of their 5th year of the progression. But one of the constraints that I put on the teaching faculty as we sat down to do this work was, these are people that are really passionate and at times myopic about their content area. So I was like, whoa, this is not your opportunity to turn this into a magnet school for science. You know what I mean? We have to look at what we currently do in terms of graduation requirements for science, 3 years, and that needs to be the baseline. And students should be able to, out of the gate, get to graduation or get to the minimum graduation requirement in the same amount of time. Some sooner, some longer, that's pretty much the way it goes. And we're also just going to recognize that as we currently experience, the vast majority of our students will exceed our minimum graduation requirements.
I think to Dan's point, I think that gets more complicated when you look at those transferable skills, right? Because that's going to be harder for them to know they're catching all of those, right? The math component, like you said, it's fairly straightforward right now because the pathways are not as expansive as they might be in 5 years from now.
The advantage that the transferable skills will have, or the advantage we'll have in terms of the transferable skills, is they're going to appear in so many places.
Right.
That, whereas if you're not meeting the mark in terms of this solving graduation requirement, you're going to have to, and we don't know exactly what we're going to do for students who don't meet the mark, but you're going to have to specifically pay attention to that.
Right.
If you're not meeting clear and effective communication here, you might meet it somewhere else.
Right.
And so But the tracking of it is going to be a fun
That's-
project
yeah.
to take on. And actually, that's part of the presentation tonight, so a little bit.
So I did get a parent question today from someone who wanted to be here but
Yeah.
couldn't, about what happens if students are not proficient, and then what do you do to help them along, or do you not push them along? I mean, because her point was, I think, that in our history is that we tend to push kids through the grades kind of regardless in some ways, and are we still going to do that, because then this is just kind of a fruitless effort?
Right, so the answer to that is no. We're not gonna just push them along. So I'll give you the high school equivalent of like pushing along. Currently, if I'm a high school sophomore, freshman year I take an English 9 or humanities, sophomore year I take English 10, American Studies. That's a pretty standardized program for every kid. Junior, senior year, things open up, there's elective-based program. If I'm a student that doesn't really like to read, maybe I'm not a good reader, I might noodle my way through courses that don't have a lot of reading. So under this new construct, you'll spend your first 2 years being assessed at the pre-graduation level. You'll have a pretty good idea of what your strengths and areas of growth are. And then you're going to have to plan your last 2 years to make sure you're going to hit the mark in those proficiencies. And so if you don't hit the mark on speaking and listening, then you're going to have to find a way to meet that mark. So you might have to go, when you're picking your classes, be like, I need to pick a class that's going to give me a performance assessment on speaking and listening, because didn't meet it in the last time I tried.
So it's a much more informed process.
So that seems like a pretty heavy burden, more of a burden on A, your guidance staff, and B, your teachers, as they're trying to help kids choose courses. And oftentimes, kids kind of, it seems to me, at least in my experience, kids kind of choose, and I don't know. I'm just, do you know what I'm saying?
It's absolutely, and there are a few things that are really important to remember, and that is that the proficiencies are going to show up multiple times in multiple places.
Right.
So kids are going to get a lot of, that's really important, a lot and varied opportunities to meet the proficiencies. And when I talk about this in terms of phase 2, in phase 2, you might be able to, meet a proficiency that typically shows up on an English language arts document. You may be able to meet that proficiency in a performing arts context.
Right.
So for some students, it's going to open up opportunities for them to play to their strengths. And for other students, we're going to be closing some of the cracks underneath the kind of D-. Like, what is a D-? It's like you were nice and did some things, and I like you, and I don't want to completely bash the D-, having received one in my life, but I knew exactly what it was. But and so the tracking of all these, definitely something that we're going to have to make sure is clear and transparent. And there's a little snapshot of how we're going to be able to do that in this presentation, but it's something that we're paying really close attention to. And I don't want to. The development of this performance assessment system, massive, like significant change in our assessment culture. And I think it's really important that those assessments are developed at the classroom level. I'm not going to go out to like Pearson's or the College Board and say, hey, give me some assessments that will, that I can give, like fill in the bubble to tell me if my kids are, proficient in writing or something like that. We're going to develop those assessments at the classroom level, connected to what the teachers are teaching. Our teachers are going to assess those, grade those, etc. So, but that's a really significant shift in our assessment culture on the classroom level. Although it's not completely throwing everything up in the air, because when I audited our mid-year assessments this year, and when you flip through them, you see a number of examples of performance assessment that's happening. And increasingly, our teachers are moving away from, kind of fill in the blank, one answer questions to take these 3 documents, tell me how they relate to each other, what kind of bias do you see between these 2? Those are the kinds of not simple answer questions that we're seeing when we're at our best. And so it is a shift in terms of developing the system. It's not a shift in terms of our ability to do it. It's really when we're at our best.
And I just want to add one little quick thing too, and that's one of the reasons why it's important that the ends, the transferable skills, be embedded in the content and not be separate kind of assessments or pieces, so that there are multiple ways, again, for kids to show, that they have, whatever those skills and pieces are. Because we also know there's content strengths that kids have or interests that drive them, but that doesn't mean they can't transfer that knowledge somewhere else, which is really, the thought.
And just remember that we're not going to be assessing kids at the graduation level until the current grade 7 students are juniors. So we I don't want to overstate the amount of time we have, but we are, we're definitally being mindful of the magnitude of that task.
So if you look at this year's graduates, and you project what 10 years from now graduates are going to look like, what's going to be different about them?
I think that right now, we have a pretty good understanding of what students know. I think in 10 years, we'll have an excellent understanding of what they can do with that knowledge. And so I think that will be the biggest difference between, current grads and future. It's a nice lacrosse team, It's hard to be a lacrosse player in Vermont when there's, still 9 inches of snow on the ground. Yeah. Did I answer your question, Ms. Fleming? Is that?
Yeah,
And I think you're thinking about it the right way, and Dan, I think that's a good question in terms of, you're gonna have lived with us a lot longer than a lot of the people you'll be explaining it to.
Right.
So I think kind of constantly pulling up and saying, how do I come up with, the elevator speech version? And that would be one way to kind of answer the question of what will be different about that group of
Yeah, we gotta be
kids.
doing this for a reason, for something we want to be different, right?
But then going down to
Hopefully
whatever
better.
level parents and guardians want to ultimately go to.
And to be honest, that's the other conversation we had today at our meeting. Lissa's done a lot of this work. I mean, we really want to give credit to, pulling it together and really leading. But what is the branding, the elevator speech, the piece that makes it simple for people to see and to understand.
And I think equally important is get excited about it.
Well, and I think there is excitement. I mean, I think that, when you really begin talking about it, because we were talking about grading today, for example, the question of to learn instead of to earn, was in one of the articles we read. It just kind of, that's what we're really talking about is, really making sure that kids have really high levels of learning.
And I think if I were answering that question to, a parent whose child was in 7th grade, the other thing I would probably add is that we would be able to show evidence that your child is ready for their next step a little bit better than we can right now. And I think as a parent, I would be like, okay, because I'm pretty anxious about my kid being ready for the next step. I mean, I think we all are. And so I think inherent in this, in a proficiency-based system, is that, is that we have evidence that that to the individual student level can do that. Evidence that extends beyond 1.5 years of PE. B+.
Has there been any discussion, Patrick, of kind of, next-gen EQS because I know this is problematic generally in Vermont about, we have high graduation rates, but our rates of kids that go on to college education, for instance, is not the best either, or not the best.
Mhm.
Do we have anything that's sort of anticipating the impact of EQS on sort of on that part of furthering education?
You know, I don't know. I haven't, you know, I think that because ultimately the EQS are grounded in our state standards, which have a lot of connection to higher ed.
Mhm.
I think ultimately there's been thought to college and career readiness, just in the kind of documents that the state's been releasing, as well as the standards that the state's adopted.
Well, it seems, based on what I'm seeing, that that should improve. I just wondered if where there was any deliberate decision-making about, we actually are going to track that generation and develop some kind of information base
Yeah.
that says, yeah, that bore itself out.
I think the conversation alone is going to have a significance on that transitional next step. And, you know, certainly, you know, the work of, you know, our high school principals, up through the system, Rebecca Holcomb, and the connection to higher learning, I think is likely to have more traction than we've ever had before. And I think higher ed is definitely listening. I'll say listening. I don't know acting, but listening to where we're at. And so I have to believe that it will, and I hope it will become more deliberate.
In terms of performance assessment and you know, the proficiency-based model, actually higher ed has been a little bit, and I'm not one to really put higher ed on a pedestal in terms of like instructional practices, etc. But to be honest, if you talk to people about what they really remembered and valued from their experience in higher ed, usually it's not the 350 student lecture, it's the, oh, when we were in the field, you know, oh, when I was, you know, giving my doctoral defense or my master's defense. Well, those are performance tests. So the kinds of things that stick with people in higher ed are things that you know, we're trying to create more and more of. And so to the extent that our, you know, putting students under that system better prepares them for higher ed, I think that will then, you know, lead to, have some good outcomes. I want to keep moving though.
Right.
Yeah,
Because I also have these items to talk about, and I'm going to roll through these faster, I promise. But again, don't hesitate to ask me questions about these. PLPs, part of Act 77. So not part of EQS, but also has the power of law, so our compliance here is important. And so in order to be in compliance, we are going to begin our PLPs with the next year's grade 9 students. And so, and also, Mr. Slenter and his teaching faculty are going to begin the PLPs with the class of 2020 at Tuttle, so those are their grade 7. And what we're going to do here is we're going to begin by using the existing sophomore portfolio framework. We are, in many ways, really fortunate that we've had that sophomore portfolio and exhibition program in place here for almost 10 years. It's well ingrained in the culture of the school, and so there are some tweaks that we're going to add to that to make sure that it really does take on that kind of personalized learning plan. That's what we're going to do for beginning with next year's grade 9 students, and then obviously they'll take that through their sophomore exhibition. There's a required annual parent meeting that's written within Act 77, and we have yet to determine how that is going to happen. I mean, right now, we would be compliant with Act 77 if it were every 2 years you had to have that meeting, because the sophomore exhibition would meet that. But it's an annual meeting with the parent and the student and a faculty member to review their personalized learning plan, and we have yet to figure out how we're going to do that.
With the middle school kids as well?
Yes.
Yes, every kid.
Every kid.
So eventually, is 7 through 12, right? I mean, next year it's 7 and 9. And just to add on, right now, there's a committee of the teachers, because they loop. So the teachers who have 8th graders this year will have the 7th grade. They are meeting with Carson regularly. They have a committee as they're building their plan for their students that they'll be receiving in the 6th grade next year.
So is it a mandatory you hold a meeting for all parents?
No, it's mandatory individual meeting, student, parent, advisor, yes. So, and actually, it's awesome. I mean, when we said we were gonna do sophomore exhibitions 8-10 years ago, people were like, there is no way you're gonna get every sophomore parent in here for a meeting, not gonna happen, you'll be lucky if you get half of them, blah, 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 and we've done it every year.
Yeah.
And so, and they're, I think they're great, you know, I mean, they're not all great, but I think overall, it's a really valuable rite of passage. So yeah, we're gonna be doing that every year. Now, you'll see, I'm gonna talk about it a little bit, they're not going to be sophomore roundtables every year. You know what I mean? But I do think that, and you'll see this when I go through the PLPs, like at the 100,000-foot level. There are going to be 2 big years for kids in terms of exhibitions, and one of them is likely to remain your sophomore year. So anyway, that's to be determined. Not necessarily with next year's freshmen, but definitely with the class of 2020. But perhaps with next year's freshmen, we're going to use a software package that some of you may be familiar with called Naviance, which includes some reflection and post-secondary planning tools. We use that for all of our juniors and seniors right now as part of their post-secondary planning process. It's something that BSAC's really put a lot of energy and effort behind in terms of connecting it with PLPs. And Naviance is a really powerful tool in a lot of ways that we don't use it currently, and we're going to be increasing our utilization of that software as part of the personalized learning plan. So we're also going to look for a PLP connection to every course, and that's something that I think is really important because the as much as we care about all transferable skills and the whole child and all of that, the heartbeat of this school is the academic classroom. And so it's going to be really important for us to have, I'd like to say that kids are going to touch their PLP once in every class. And so, and I think that's important because I don't want PLPs to be seen as like, oh, that's something that guidance does. You know, yep, that's a guidance thing. Or don't you need to hire like 4 PLP coordinators so that they can take care of the kids and all their PLPs? You know, I want the PLPs to be part of the student's experience in every course. And you know, I could be back here in 5 years and showing you how PLPs connect to students outside life, and how all of their co-curriculars and volunteer work is also something that's required to be in their PLPs. So here's what a 7, 8, 9 PLP kind of covers. I'm just going to talk about the goals. And really the 7, 8, 9 PLP is assist students. And my focus obviously is 8 to 9 transition. So we want students to use their PLPs to help them transition to high school. So the other group of folks that we need to work with in terms of our PLPs, in addition to Tuttle, are our tuition students from Georgia, Grand Isle, et cetera. So, you know, once we get this, I think, pretty tight, I'm going to look to offer, you know, some of these kinds of services to those students at those schools so that, you know, an 8th grader at Georgia Middle School who knows he or she wants to go to South Burlington can start their SBHS PLP, you know, at the end of 7th grade or the beginning of 8th grade. Same thing for Grand Isle or wherever. Okay, next slide. Grades 9 and 10, we really want to help students, you know, basically assimilate to high school, start to be exposed to career options, start to play with things like resume building, understanding what they're good at, what they're, you know, a lot of this you'll see, this is sophomore exhibition on steroids, you know, so this is sophomore exhibition plus. You'll see the second to last bullet, that starting with class of 2020, students are going to have to plan for the completion of all proficiency-based graduation requirements within their PLPs, not forgetting they're going to have these annual meetings, and the conversation about what courses you're going to take next year is probably going to take on a little bit more of a robust life in the kids. And that goes back to your question about course selection, et cetera. Grade 11, many of these bullets are part of the post-secondary planning process. And we would like to obviously start to work with students on that in grade 11. And you'll notice that the last bullet on that list talks about presenting their PLPO portfolio as part of their junior gateway exhibition. So that's the other big exhibition that we're in the planning phase, that students at their end of their junior year would have to have another big exhibition that's going to include them speaking to their plans in terms of the post-secondary planning process. So we're taking that fight out of your kitchen a little bit in terms of, are you going to write your essays? Are you going to apply to schools? What are we going to do? And we're going to try to make that part of our program. Next slide. And this is where the rubber hits the road in terms of post-secondary planning. And the senior capstone exhibition, if that's something that remains part of this, that would be something that would happen in the middle of their senior year. That's not something that we would wait until the end of the senior year to say, oh, you have to do this, and if you don't graduate. And so it's the night before graduation, and we're, right, helping them, like, come on, you can do it. But you'll see that the goal here is to use the learning plans, the PLPs, to complete the post-secondary planning process. This is just a draft list of the many activities that could relate to and support students' PLPs. Next slide. Advisory. As you may or may not know, for over 10 years we've had a successful 9th and 10th grade advisory program. And right now we're in the planning stages of a 4-year advisory program. And that John Painter's Rowland Fellowship is specifically connected to that. We are seeking to maintain the successful elements of the current system. So for example, the peer leadership program and the sophomore exhibition roundtable are pretty successful elements that have really become part of our school culture. And so we want to make sure that we maintain those. It's really important for us to have this PLP advisory proficiency-based graduation requirement intersects. And so, in John's work, he is kind of keeping an eye on that. And as Elizabeth knows, because she's on the John steering committee, as am I, there's a lot of community and student involvement in this design. John's held neighborhood learning conversations. They hosted an evening last week. And I know he's doing NLC-like discussions with students at school frequently. He's got one tomorrow, in fact. And John's also hosted faculty and student roundtables to get input and feedback about advisory, et cetera. The last bullet there I just have to mention because I'm at the school board meeting. In terms of the 4-year advisory, whatever we do, just go back. Yeah. Whatever we do, we have to account for system capacity. So I can't, I can't dream too big in terms of what I'm going to be asking advisors to do, because I think then we would run into some capacity issues in terms of whether it's contractual assignments or just how much we can really ask people to do on top of the expectations we already have. And so I'm kind of guarding against myself sometimes to make sure that I'm not, piling too much onto the individuals that are going to have to implement the system. So these are just activities that have been ongoing. This is actually a slide that I've been showing in this presentation. This is the 4th time you've seen this slide. And the red is just important to continue to remember that at some point on your calendar, we're going to have to start with January of next year and work backwards in terms of the adoption of the graduation requirements. I think that's the last slide. Is that the last slide?
Just a quick question on the adoption of those. Do you anticipate that might be a rolling process, or is it sort of a whole package that would need to be adopted?
Our hope is, and it's actually part of 2.10 in terms of the compliance plan, Elizabeth, but to, by early fall, having done summer work, either probably the second meeting in September, have the first reading of a complete graduation proficiency policy. That's our hope at this time.
Is there any advantage to looking at a staged or phased-in approval process?
Well, the only piece is you have to have 3 readings on whatever it is, and we really need it when we start doing course sign-up and start meeting with parents in December and January of their, 8th grade year as they're going to be freshmen. So, it's trying to, I think by having the whole document, we're more likely to be able to have those times for a deeper discussion than if you talked about math for 3 weeks and then you had to talk about science.
Well, part of me is looking at the workload to get them completed, if
Right.
it made sense, but also just the conversation the board can have, because some of it will be iterative and some of it,
And one thing I want to be clear, what we're talking about in the end are the proficiencies themselves,
Right.
not the indicators. The indicators are not board policy, those are procedures, because we might over time say, well, wait, this indicator needs to be bumped up or, or brought down. So what we're really talking about is those things in the blue box,
I don't think that, I think there still are phases, right? As we implement and make some decisions, the opportunity to revisit our policy and revise it is certainly an opportunity. So probably you're right, Elizabeth. We could talk about the revisiting of our work as we do with.
well, in some ways we're staging it now, just by having had this conversation a few times.
And I'm hearing, if I'm hearing you correctly, I appreciate that, it might be, it might be easier for us to kind of say, okay, those are done, and then let's bring you the next ones and just keep working on the other ones while you're looking at those. But the reality, especially, and even in terms of the way we're developing them, this work's all happening at the same time. And so, for me, because we have to start in on the performance assessment, so it's kind of like, let's get them.
And there is a draft for every single, right now, you haven't seen it, but there is a draft. There are various, different thought processes, because the PE teachers see the world different, and then math teachers do.
And actually, the math one, that's not even our best example.
No.
The other ones are better than that. That one's just a work in progress.
But we do, for wellness, health, everything, they're all coming together.
Right.
Anything
So,
you want to say about that?
no, that's just, that's Julie's like.
And that is the.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
We're
That was
ready when you
excellent.
are.
All right.
That was good.
Cool.
Nicely done.
We'll keep them coming. I think it might be good if I came back again before the,
The reading.
the big handoff, yeah. And, I think you should expect to hear from John Painter in terms of advisory, and his findings from his fellowship. And so, maybe I could shoehorn myself in there too that night or what have you.
Well, it'd be good that we figure out kind of, as you know, that next kind of update, or what we might say phase. Maybe we're on to something there around, as we've already traveled through some phases appropriately, but we'll slide that for an upcoming.
And I'm going to start, we're going to have a meeting this spring with the class 2020 parents. And so that might be a fun thing for you to go to.
Yeah, if I think about this wouldn't fall in the category of requiring any board approval, but given community engagement is a key criteria of the board, I think there will be a strong interest in what that communication plan will be relative to how do you break that down to the common denominator when you've been working on it for what will be probably 2 or 3 years at that point. So.
And keep in mind that going all the way back, when I tell the whole story, the actual, the proficiencies themselves have been influenced by Jason Kushner's role in fellowship, where he held numerous neighborhood learning conversations. Right. So from the from the beginning, that's been an element of this work. So as it becomes more polished, it looks less like there's been a lot of that input, but it's definitely in there.
Yes. The other piece, just Elizabeth, as part of this process that we've all been going through this grant, we are developing a 3-year plan that looks at community, looks at school board, looks at teachers and our institutions. So.
Great, thank you.
All right, thanks for having me.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 10, Executive Limitations Policy Monitoring 2.10. And it looks like, are both of these for action?
No, these are, neither one are actions, continue.
It should be.
Action, yeah, on, because we had corrections that we provided the board
I asked
on.
for a little more
Clarity on.
piece on the compliance plan.
Correct.
And so I added that step, hopefully that was
Yep.
what people were thinking.
It's added, yeah.
Yeah, the most demanding of us is not here to look at that, but in terms of the words, right?
Yeah.
Is it just the highlighted part?
Yep. We added additions to the compliance.
Right.
So, on this one, we're reporting policy non-compliance with the addition being, that after the proficiency-based graduation requirements with embedded ends, the K through 12 curriculum will be aligned to reflect grade level indicators for each graduation requirement, and performance assessments will be designed to show attainment of proficiency at the developmentally appropriate level. That's the major change, right?
Yeah, and that was based on the feedback that we received.
So are there any further questions or discussion on that? So if we go through reasonable interpretation was yes?
Yes.
Adequate data? Yes. In compliance is no. And compliance plan acceptable is yes. Okay. Just sign off on that. We'll move on to 2.8.
Yep. So 2.8, compensation and benefits. Oh, we locked Patrick out. No, maybe not. We shouldn't be locking anybody out. Thank you, Connor and me. Right. So, John and Karen Dancher actually have worked with me on this one of doing this. So we've highlighted the components. I do want to say that there are, under policy 2, I do report non-compliance, and that's a more recent action as a result of identification of what I'll say a misstep in the hiring process. So we had a individual leave. You approved he was a .2 employee, and then there was a social media correspondence that went out and said, somebody's coming on, and so there's a violation there, which results in me having some clarity around process. So I'm reporting non-compliance in that one. A lot of the other ones are fairly consistent with.
Is this the first reading of this one, just for clarity? This is the first one, okay.
Yeah, so I'm not wanting to push for action. It's available already if you would. I think it's probably right, given Martin, that you
I get excited about this because Karen, this is her first effort, you're a teacher, and I've done these before with David. But, so she's done the bulk of this work.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of feedback. I think we'll probably, take this and have a chance to review through it again. One of the things that I noted in 2 of the detail policy is this promise or imply permanent or guaranteed employment. One of the things that I have often heard discussed in my tenure on the board is lifetime earnings. And when I read that or reread that, it occurred to me that is our use of that, well, one, how prevalent is the use of that? And if we are using that routinely, is there an implication there that shouldn't be there?
So,
It's really just a question I had.
yeah, so when you say you see it, or you reflected on your time on the board, that's come up, right? Is there something specific that you're seeing in wording? Or
Well, the fact that.
in number 2,
Well, let me
on the
look
detail?
at the detail that you have under there for a
Yep.
second. So the policy is promise or imply permanent or guaranteed employment. And you've talked about, you won't, you won't negotiate permanent or guarantee employment contracts for employees, consultants, or contract workers, or guarantee employment. But I'll just ask you the question. Do you have conversations with new employees, either before or after they're hired, about lifetime earnings?
No.
Okay. Does that happen in the context of?
Not to my
I
knowledge.
think it only happens one place, unless
Okay.
you're aware of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not a
It's not been a conversation
reflection
that
in the
either.
hiring process?
In the hiring
or-
process.
Even with Karen and employees?
No. It's not, again, I can't speak to time before me here, but I've never had that conversation, and I've done a lot of.
Yeah, and
the new hires.
then when I was reflecting on it, I didn't
Yeah,
really know
good point.
because I would say if you were having that, I think it would violate this
Yeah,
to have that.
agreed.
But that's really just the reflection I had.
We're not in every hiring committee, but I've never heard it except in the teacher negotiations.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a good highlight though for me the reflection.
Yeah. Any other general comments right now? And we can kind of move this to the next
Great.
agenda for another read. Okay, so why don't
Great.
you'll just put it on the next one?
You got it.
All right, so setting the agenda for the April 15th meeting. Find it.
So we wanted to put out something about you changing this meeting?
We did, and again, wondering about availability for the following, right?
Yeah, that was actually, I asked the question if it was possible to change it.
And we did get one feedback that would be difficult for you.
I'm gone.
Yep.
That doesn't
And so it was really
work.
just kind of a quick polling of whether that, and Dan, you probably didn't know, you didn't see that maybe, because you haven't been looking at email. But it sounds like that's probably going to be difficult, but maybe we can have a quick discussion. Difficult for Julie, we don't know about Martin.
I could do it.
Pat could do it.
Do you know if you can do the 22nd?
As far as I know, yeah, I don't see any reason why not.
So could we maybe just check in with Martin, and
Yep.
we can make a call on whether or
got it.
not?
So the
and I-
proposal is move the 15th to the 22nd, is it?
Right. Elizabeth has a conflict, and we're just asking the question, what's that look like? And so we'll ask, right now, what Martin's availability is.
Is there any time restrictive agenda items on the 15th that would be problematic if we delay a week?
We're doing a lot with RFPs, but I don't see any that day, especially if we have that
The
separate
telephonic,
call in,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I won't be here on the 22nd, but David could.
I'll promise everything, John, I'm good with it. Commit all kinds of.
Is that,
It's school
that's
break.
vacation week?
It
Oh,
is.
Yeah.
Okay.
But right now, we have Pat, yes, Dan,
Yeah, we
yes,
have enough.
Julie, no, Elizabeth, yes, right?
Yes, I can do
Yep,
that.
obviously.
Yeah.
And we'll check with Martin.
Okay, so we can just make
Yep,
that call
no
maybe
problem.
tomorrow or something?
Mhm.
Okay.
So David,
Mm-hmm.
quickly, I won't be here on either the 15th or the 22nd.
Yeah, you've told me that.
What's that?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Right, but in terms of this question, ends monitoring progress, that came up at a meeting about a month ago, prior to 2.10, and prior to like this work that we're just showing you, in terms of how we really are moving forward with the ends now. So I just don't know what I would tell you that was new on a regular basis, even though at that point, I think through frustration, members wanted to see, a more regular update. I really think a quarterly thing would still be, at this point, more useful than,
Well,
every meeting.
it might be worthwhile keeping it on the agenda as a board discussion of calibrating where we are since we've covered that ground, so.
And that's fine. I just want people to know, if you're looking at moves, I won't be here for that discussion, and you might want to just move it off to the next agenda.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay, that's good. We'll make the,
Anything else on
on
50?
10. You have a lot of stuff on 10. Do you,
yeah,
I mean, three of those we haven't touched on yet.
well, compensation and benefits, you've had a short
Right, but the other
conversation on.
three.
Yeah, and again, these are,
Is this
they're in
the
like,
performance review?
I need to get that going, so I don't want to have that, so I need to begin that process. We can defer that one.
Well, are we, timing-wise, are we on schedule for that, or are we behind?
No, you're never behind, yes. I'm not positive where you are in the schedule. I'd like to put that off. But
It's about time.
yeah, it's scheduled, this is when we did it.
I just want to make sure we're not behind on that.
I'll check for you.
The asset protection is just the start of that, right, John? Because it's
Right.
not
We
continued.
had a subcommittee scheduled. And
Oh, right.
Changed it as a
we didn't
result.
have
So
too
are
much
you going to
already.
reschedule that maybe with us, with the subcommittee?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Am I on that committee?
No.
Do you want to be?
I just need to know.
We'll look at those. I mean, again, we have our work session coming up with kind of some of the,
One of the things that came, no, actually, I'll hold for the legislative discussion. Was there anything else we needed to move forward on this particular agenda?
let's see, what did we just talk about?
I think we've got it covered here.
Yeah.
So will we, on the master planning, will we get some of the numbers at that? An update on what happened from last night?
Well, certainly you're gonna get an update. And once we pull all the feedback in, it'd be nice to give the board,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what version of an update,
Yeah.
I don't know how granular I'll be, but it may be advantageous for us to give you some additional information. Again, Don and his staff have done a huge amount of work on the financial modeling. It's changed, of course, with some of these throughout the process, so I think we want to keep you up to date and ahead of the public a little bit on that. Now, obviously, last night was a push to provide the options, but now that we have it more narrowed, we'll be able to provide the board a little bit more of information ahead of time.
Okay. All right, so no other feedback on the next meeting's agenda?
I have just sort of a general question. We have on the future agenda items, whoever sits in this seat has to worry about future agenda.
Yeah, that's right, Dan. Good. Diane would be proud.
I was gonna
You're
suggest
feeling
you
it.
worry about that, but.
Diane would be proud, yes.
Yeah.
We have a number of these things where 2.10 was supposed to provide the answer to these questions. Did it?
Well, a couple of things. One is it does refer to those things within 2.10, and I actually quoted the sections within the policy. But also, obviously, the report we just had from Patrick and myself are on a number of those pieces. And again, we're going to have to keep coming back
We
to,
can take EQS off that.
but it does make the check mark system seem
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
kind of an interesting piece.
Well, I'm
How do we
looking,
eliminate this?
well, I was looking at EQS, and then the curriculum content, those two.
And also there's one up here on survey results.
Well, we didn't.
That one we didn't really.
Yeah, that we didn't
David,
really get.
No.
But we can take those
I
off.
might suggest we just not take them off, but rebase the check marks.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the effort of kind of the staged
Right.
phasing concept that you
Because
talked
we
about.
know, and the reality is, I think this may, I mean, some of these end up being permanent agenda items when they're significant content. So I would just take the check marks off those two, because we've covered it now.
Well, as you said, rebase it, maybe we.
We were
as of-
rebasing, but we might have to make a decision whether, because it sounds like this could become a more significant agenda item. I don't know if it'll come to the board in one shot, or we'll have multiple
Well,
discussions.
there'll probably be an update before we
Yeah.
come with the final policy for sure. And then if you look at continuous improvement plan, I mean, that will be an actual agenda item for your second meeting in May.
Yep.
Because you need to see them,
So why don't, I'm wondering,
Just
with our
rebase them.
calendar for our policy governance monitoring report,
Mhm.
I'm wondering, based on the phasing or rebasing, maybe we just annotate and update the calendar with, under 210 to reflect it, because, right, we're gonna have some
Well, maybe we
ongoing
should change,
phasing
why
that
don't we
way?
change that agenda item on 8 for whenever we meet to ends monitor progress update and calendar review?
Right, and then you can, so we don't lose it, maybe we need to embed the work on our monitoring
It seems
calendar.
like we usually do our calendar after the vote anyway, don't we?
Right, I'm just, I think you're onto something, because EQS, it's not going away. In the
Right.
spirit of phasing as opposed to one-off, let's maybe
Get it on.
get it on the calendar.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think,
So
we'll
I'd
add the-
rebase those now, although I felt like the continuous improvement plan didn't get addressed.
No, it hasn't, because
No.
actually, the schools are working to update their continuous improvement plans for the next year,
Gotcha.
which you'll see in May.
So the two top bullet points on the second page, we'll
Mhm.
take the checks off, and then we'll have a discussion in the context of,
So would it be, as a suggestion, the check marks were intended to try to
Remind you
to
of,
remind us that we weren't paying attention to things for quite a period of time, right?
Mhm.
That's what the purpose was. But if we get a date certain for when we're gonna get a response, should we perhaps replace that bunch of check marks by that date?
if we have a date,
If we have a
sure.
date.
yeah,
So,
see,
for
my
example,
plan
Stuart's
was,
saying that on continuous improvement, we've got some.
Whatever the second May
Second
meeting
meeting
is,
of May,
Then,
and if that's consistent
Put it
with the
in.
calendar,
yeah.
and then we can
yeah, and
just.
I was trying to take a little bit of a higher view and get it embedded onto the, which we can talk about next time, get it embedded on the calendar, and then you don't have to continue to either rebase it.
Yeah,
It's embedded.
and if it goes onto the calendar, then it can come off this list,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Yeah.
as long as we then police the calendar.
Yep. Okay.
I think that, I
Although
wouldn't
I-
start putting a lot of minutia on the calendar, so if some of these are really quick reports,
Mhm.
I'm not sure I'd populate the calendar with all of it, but you can make that
Right,
assessment.
right. I think I got you. mean,
Yeah, I like that idea, Dan, that when we have a date too, you
Mhm.
can just highlight that and.
Yeah, but that-
It is kind of nice to have this
But-
on the calendar, or on the agenda. It does bring,
I think the check
people are
marks have
asking
been, I
about
think
it.
they've been helpful in terms of.
Moving us
Highlighting
along.
areas of neglect.
But if our response to it is to set a date for it, just date certain for it, then
We do that.
why accumulate some more checkpoints?
Yep.
So and then if in turn, we can take them off this list and put them in, and put them into the calendar on a periodic quarterly basis or
Very
something
good.
like that, I'm okay with that too. That just
Yep.
makes sense, so.
All
The
right.
the intent is not to forget these things, right? So,
I think we're doing a good job not forgetting.
And you're doing a good job.
So we will review, move on to agenda item 13, the minutes of the March 4th meeting. Any comments or changes? And seeing none, those are approved.
Great.
And the meeting of March 18th. And seeing no comments, those are also approved. We added legislative discussion in here. Do you want to just do a quick recap, David?
Yeah, again, certainly board members are aware of activity going on in the legislature. Obviously, with the array of bills that are in front of our legislators and those that would affect us. Currently, what I would say, there's two bills really that are pretty significant. H361, which is dealing with kind of the funding mechanism, and H76, which talks about collective bargaining specific to strike imposition and kind of the process by which resolve happens. And then I think probably on another one is a little bit of what I would say secondary, which is S9, which I'm not sure what that life will be, and that's been on kind of the child protection and reporting. So I open it up really for discussion and whether the board wants, again, we've got a lot of activity, we've had a lot of communication with our representatives, including obviously Martin, who's likely was tied up today, and that's why he's not here. There's so many things that happen right now almost on a daily basis, and I want to be an appropriate liaison for you, the board, and making sure we're on top of those things that are relevant and concerning to our
Yeah,
work.
I think the House will vote on 361 tomorrow. So we've given feedback to the House representatives on the cap that does represent the consensus of the board. What I've heard is it likely will pass with an amendment that was presented today on a different formula for the cap. I guess I'll reserve, since we haven't heard what the definitive language is that passed, we'll have an opportunity to review that. I would probably suggest that if we want to formulate a potential board position when it goes to the Senate, that we will have an opportunity Monday to discuss whether we want to delegate that to a subcommittee of the board and circulate it and get some opinions on that. So that would be the next step relative to the cap. And then I haven't heard when H76 goes. And I know there's some concern about the penalties and making sure that binding arbitration is excluded from that. So I guess we'll look to get an update from the Helen's committee on that. She indicated in my conversation with her earlier that she doesn't think she has enough votes to get that out of committee. I just don't know when it will be voted on. The one thing I think that came up this week was starting to kind of dollarize the impact of some of the legislature that ultimately will be passed, and also some of the unfunded mandates that represent concerns of this district and the cap in 361 right now. So I know, John, you've got a ballpark in there. I think David.
Not complete, but
General.
I got Stuart together yesterday and we talked about things that we knew could be quantified and some aren't, so.
Well, and I think it would be
Yeah.
good to be thinking about, because we're having more routine meetings and communication with our legislators, so the more we can articulate specifics about the impact of penalties or caps or unfunded mandates or, tax rate impact or whatever the impact might be, to give them a little bit of ammunition when they're speaking to their home district, I think it would be helpful. And I know one of our big issues on the cap was the fact that that cap is going to be administered on top of a series of unfunded mandates, including everything we just heard about, plus dual enrollment, plus universal pre-K, and on top of the fact that we don't know if there are off-ramps or exclusions for debt service and the ADA project that, for instance, that was discussed today. So the more we can dollarize, once the legislation is passed, or it looks like it may be passed, I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
Again, even if it's ballpark. And I know some of what you articulated, John, was that it's redeployment of resources that is costing the district. But that to me is a double whammy, because it's the cost of doing some work that otherwise didn't exist before, but it's the work that's not getting done too. And
Right.
what happens, who does it, and what happens when it doesn't
Yeah,
get
our
done.
IT director, he would be able to help a little bit more, because it took a lot.
Okay.
Well,
Time
like
for
SBAC
testing.
SBAC
Yeah.
alone, right, the deployment of that, exorbitant amount of
I'll
time.
give you a whole report on that.
Well, again, I think it's just thoughtful with the pace that the legislature's going, that we be able to articulate that.
That's good, yeah.
Any other discussion on legislative activities? Just stay tuned. It's like the weather.
I think, as changes happen, if you hear something, you certainly, I can work to keep people updated through the email system, send it to me. I usually try to push your finding or your information out to everyone else so that people are informed. Again, VSA and VSBA are helpful to the process, and I don't want to assume that you're seeing it, so there may be some level of redundancy, but in the spirit of just keeping on top of it, this is a really important time, I would say, over the next, 2 weeks right now are going to be really, really important to pay attention. I don't mean for us just to be aware that things travel fast now.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 14, the consent agenda.
So I just quickly,
Okay.
you can see, we've got, a fair number of folks that are coming forward. Obviously, we got our contracts earlier this year than ever before. Now, I can say not a lot earlier, but we issued contracts, and then there's a period of time of return. Some folks had their mind made up, but again, by issuing contracts, we feel it's really important around our staffing levels and consistency for the upcoming year. So you're definitely probably seeing a little bit of an uptick as a result of our contract issuance.
Has the time gone by?
The time has gone by, yep, and so the contracts were due on Friday. There are some, very few, that have asked for some extensions as a result of needs for appointments to things like teacher retirement, and so there's not many here, but again, I'm wanting to be fair to that process. Obviously, we have some folks that have been here longer than others, and I would certainly say, Joanna Smith, longtime employee, Linda Waltine, over 35 years. Again, we have a slight reduction with Steve Webster, going from 1.0 to 0.8. Kelly Canales, obviously you may know of her too, a special educator, moving on. So again, I don't want to, they're all important, but really specifically, we've got Joanne, it's not, doesn't say Joanne anyway, it's really Jody Smith and Linda Waltine, and certainly on your behalf, I'll send something to them that, recognizes, again, long service here to the district. So, anyway.
Great. We're really grateful for their service. These are good people.
Mm-hmm. So I'll certainly make note of that. On the bid side, our WB Mason and the 3 buses are, I think, self-explanatory, and I don't know if you have any questions before you act.
I just want to add the bus is a fierce competition. And as it has been in the last 3 years, we have all 3 major manufacturers bidding, and there's differences in their cost based on warranty provided and service, and I try to lay that out a little better than we usually do. A couple ways of looking at it, any way you look at it, Cressy comes in a little bit lower. If you take a warranty out or put it back in their version, so it's really close. And so I don't often say it, sometimes you may get some feedback, that's all.
Mm-hmm.
From some of the bidders.
Yes, but we've gone through, our he's not new, but our new mechanic has helped us with specifications and.
With how close this was, John, was there any weight given to local? I see one is Jericho based.
There was weight there, yes, and that's one of the issues. One of the advantages of Cressy over Clark's, which is local, is Cressy sends a mechanic right to our shop. It doesn't sound like much, but driving a bus to Jericho and then having somebody come back takes time, because our mechanic is also driving right now. It's not the ideal
Well, it's
condition.
also when the bus is likely in need of that level of mechanic, it's not as easy as you think to just get it there, right? These are not little small vehicles, so it's really, that's a nice benefit.
So are there some avoided costs Is that what you're saying, Jeff?
Yes, because Cressy has a in-state service that comes here right to the shop.
And they're not accounted for in the bids as totals here.
They're not in the dollars, but in the write-up on the selection
Yeah,
criteria.
they're in the qualitative part,
Right.
but they're not in the dollar part. So
Right.
there's, that bid is effectively somewhat lower than what's indicated.
Yes, and it's a little bit hard to keep quantifying.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe nothing's wrong and nobody has to go anyplace, right?
Yes, that's the ideal. And we felt that WB Mason had done a really good job last year, and we didn't see anybody clamoring for competition. So we asked them, can you hold the price, or what would you do? And the state has a 3.1 contract limit, you can just automatically re-up. And they did a little bit of that, but most of our prices are the same, so.
All right, so do we have to motion on these?
Not
action?
on individuals, you can do it under consent, under 14.
So I can do the whole consent agenda?
On 14.
So do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as recommended?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
All right.
Motion passes.
I think we should skip this. I'm serious.
Okay.
You can do it next time if you
Yeah,
want.
we'll do it next time. Any discussion on AP orders 34 and 35? Okay, we'll move on to Agenda 16. We have action required on AP order check to Essex Community Education Center in the amount of $59,079.68. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Do I have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. And it sounds like we will postpone our board self-evaluation to the next meeting. Do I have any other announcements, David? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Who is this?
We are adjourned.